After 3 days in the residential complex, Xiao Ran was restless again. He couldn't help it. It was a sense of crisis. If he remained complacent, others would continuously grow stronger, far surpassing him. Moreover, in the early days of the apocalypse, it was the easiest time to increase one's strength. After breakfast, Xiao Ran set out alone. His car slowly drove out of the residential complex. Behind the windows of the complex's buildings, few people were still watching him. The vast residential complex, after the riot in Building 4 and Xiao Ran's massacre, had less than 1 in 100 of its original inhabitants remaining. Xiao Ran drove out of the complex. He wasn't acting blindly. He had a plan. His main goal was to find energy sources. Although he had already stored a considerable amount of fuel, if he thought in terms of decades, this reserve was far from enough. So, naturally, he targeted gas stations one by one. Collecting energy was the primary objective. If he happened to encounter espers along the way, that would be even better. Half an hour later, he arrived at the first gas station. Collect. Bad luck. The tanks weren't full, only about a third remaining. Oh well, every little bit helps. Xiao Ran wasn't picky. His interdimensional space was large enough, so he just stuffed it all in. He headed to the next gas station. In every city, banks and gas stations were the most numerous. So, it wasn't long before he reached the second gas station. The haul here was better. The tanks were more than half full. Since he was already there, he naturally looted the gas station's convenience store as well. Although he didn't particularly care for these items, they could be used to win people over. In these times, any food was precious, wasn't it? He had studied the map and chosen an optimal route. By 3 in the afternoon, he had visited 9 gas stations. This efficiency was possible only because Xiao Ran drove at just 20 mph. He arrived at his last stop for the day. After looting the tanks here, he planned to head home to avoid the fog gathering again and trapping him in the wilderness, forcing him to spend the night in his car. He reached his final gas station for the day, but just as he arrived, he saw a group of people busy in the storage tank area, clearly prying open the tanks to get oil. Counting them, 7 people were working, and 2 more were sitting in a vehicle. A large truck. Understandable. Without a large truck, how much oil could they possibly take back? However, what made Xiao Ran's expression darken was that this group, for warmth, had actually started a fire in a wash basin right next to them. Are you crazy? The oil tanks are right there, and you're lighting a fire for warmth? Xiao Ran didn't dare to approach. Of course, he wasn't afraid of these people, but he was worried they might accidentally knock the fire basin towards the oil tanks, causing a massive explosion. This was no laughing matter. Xiao Ran's reflexes and danger sense should allow him to open his spatial gate in time. But the spatial gate was a flat plane, capable only of absorbing flames and shockwaves from the front. In a large explosion, however, flames and shockwaves would swirl chaotically. Besides, while the spatial gate could indeed absorb any attack, its frame could not. Xiao Ran had tested it by throwing rocks at the frame, which caused a certain backlash to him. The greater the impact, the stronger the backlash. Therefore, if he were hit by a major explosion, Xiao Ran couldn't guarantee he would survive the backlash. Damn it. Indeed, idiots are the scariest. Xiao Ran shook his head. He didn't dare start a fight here, fearing a stray bullet or a high-kinetic energy steel rod might accidentally hit an oil tank and trigger an explosion. Hey, someone's here. Yo, isn't that a G-Wagon? SUVs are suited for bad terrain anyway, and this one looks modified. Let's rob him. The 7 men who had been working exchanged glances and rushed over. They had been prying open oil tanks, so they were all holding various tools, hammers, wrenches, which now serve as weapons as they charge forward menacingly. Xiao Ran had plenty of time to drive away, but did he need to fear these 7 men? He was only afraid of stray shot hitting the oil tanks or the fire basin being knocked over and igniting the tanks. But now that all 7 had come over, away from the tanks, what did he have to fear? In fact, Xiao Ran even opened his car door and stepped out. Swish! A wrench shot towards him. Fast and accurate, its target was clearly his head. This was an attempt on his life. Xiao Ran's expression was calm. He reached out his hand and, smack, caught the wrench with incredible precision. What? The 7 men stared, dumbfounded, their eyes filled with shock. You had to understand, the wrench was spinning as it flew, as fast as the blades of an electric fan. To catch it with one hand required what kind of eyesight and what incredible accuracy. For an ordinary person, this was extremely difficult. But Xiao Ran's physique was far beyond ordinary. So, even without using his abilities, he could do it easily. Xiao Ran looked at the man who had thrown it, gave a cold smile, and with a wave of his hand, sent the wrench flying back like a meteor towards his attacker. Thud! The man had no time to react. By the time he saw a dark shadow instantly magnified before his eyes, the wrench had already struck, and he lost consciousness. His head split open. He was dead. Xiao Ran clapped his hands together as if he had done something trivial. Oldly, the others exclaimed in horror. They saw Oldly slowly fall backward, a wrench embedded in his face, sunk in a good 6 or 7 centimeters deep. Heavens! The crowd was so horrified their scalps tingled. A wrench could certainly kill someone, but to be thrown from 6 or 7 meters away, pierce through facial bone, and embed itself, that was just too outrageous, too terrifying. The strength required was immense. As Lowley collapsed, the two men in the large truck couldn't sit still any longer. They both flung open their doors and climbed out, an involuntary shiver running through them. It was freezing. Then, both men drew their guns simultaneously. Motherfucker, you dare hurt my men. Time to die. Both men fired at the same time. Vicious, domineering. You killed my man. I don't care about the circumstances or who's right or wrong. I just want a life. A life for a life. The moment the two men raised their guns, Xiao Ran had already opened a spatial gate. Swish, swish, 2 bullets had already shot out. So the instant they fired, they were already corpses. When dealing with enemies, Xiao Ran was always decisive and ruthless. Since he had made his move, he naturally wouldn't stop at just killing 2. With another thought from Xiao Ran, whoosh, 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 rocks flew out from the spatial gate, hurtling towards 5 of the remaining 6 men. How fast were the stones? Over 20 meters per second. And how fast could humans move? Even a world champion sprinter only reached about 10 meters per second. Moreover, that included reaction time and an acceleration phase. So the 5 men had almost no defense. Thud, thud, thud. Their heads were all smashed to pulp. The dangers of falling objects, indeed. Xiao Ran clicked his tongue. There had originally been 9 men in this group, but in just an instant, only 1 was left alive. And it wasn't because he had any extraordinary skills. It was purely because Xiao Ran wanted to leave someone a question. The man had initially worn a cruel, mocking smile, which he hadn't even had time to wipe away before it instantly contorted with terror. His expression was quite a sight. What was happening? How could this be? 8 lively men, full of vigor just moments ago, had all become corpses in the blink of an eye. A demon. This person was a demon. He stared blankly at Xiao Ran, his whole body trembling uncontrollably. Xiao Ran looked back at him, a slight smile playing on his lips. What's your name? Zhu. Zhu Hongming, the man stammered, shivering. Xiao Ran nodded. Where are you all from? Zhu Hongming hastily replied. We're from the Baolong Corporation. Baolong Corporation? The Chong family. Chong Shuli's family. Hadn't the Chong family collapsed yet? Xiao Ran felt a flicker of interest. Who's your boss? Old Master Chong, of course. Zhu Hongming blurted out. Xiao Ran rolled his eyes. And who is Old Master Chong? He only knew that Baolong Corporation was a major enterprise in Sioux City, with connections in both legitimate and underworld circles, but he really didn't know who was in the Chong family. Who would care? Old Master Chang's name is Chong Baolong. He's the one who single-handedly founded Baolong Corporation, Zhu Hongming said. Xiao Ran thought for a moment, then asked, what's the relationship between Chong Baolong and Chong Shuli? You know our young master? Zhu Hongming asked back, somewhat surprised and pleased. Was this like the flood washing over the Dragon King's temple, failing to recognize one's own? Smack! Zhu Hongming received a slap across the face. His cheek burned, and it sobered him up. He quickly said, Young Master Chong is Old Master's eldest grandson. Oh, so is the grandson's generation already. Xiao Ran pursed his lips. You guys are quite capable, managing to drive all the way out here. Having been slapped, Zhu Hongming didn't dare beat around the bush with Xiao Ran any longer. He quickly explained, Our old master has a transport fleet that regularly travels to and from Mo. So our trucks are always equipped with snow chains, and we have adequate heating and insulation. Xiao Ran's expression was a little odd. This was truly a case of a blind cat stumbling upon a dead mouse. Too much of a coincidence. Previously, because it was still hailing, they hadn't dared to come out even though the trucks had sufficient anti-cold and anti-skid capabilities. But now that the hail had stopped, as soon as the dense fog cleared, the trucks could naturally venture out. Still, the Chong family was quite formidable. Societal order had already collapsed, and the wealth the Chong family once used to win loyalty had all vanished. So, what was the Chong family relying on to make these people obey and not betray them? Money was useless now. What about supplies? They were clearly sending people out to gather energy and food, so the Chong family probably didn't have enough supplies to unite people either. Couldn't figure it out? Then just ask. You clearly have 2 heavy trucks. You could go anywhere. Why didn't you run? Xiao Ran asked. Zhu Hongming shook his head. It's freezing outside, but the corporation has heating. And he hesitated. Then, seeing Xiao Ran's displeased expression, he continued. An old master's second son, Vice President Chang Yingxiong. He seems to have superpowers, just like you. Oh, Xiao Ran's eyes lit up. His initial mild interest suddenly surged. Tell me about it. Zhu Hongming said, Actually, I only heard from others. Vice President Chang can breathe fire like Red Boy. Fire powers? Xiao Ran couldn't help but ask. How did Chang Yingxiong get his Abalai superpowers? I don't know about that either. Zhu Hongming shook his head. His status was too low. If he had left the two gunmen alive for interrogation, would he have learned more? Never mind, no ifs. He continued to question him about where the Chang family lived, how many people there were, and so on. Zhu Hongming didn't dare hide anything and quickly spilled all the details. After listening, Xiao Ran casually tossed a rock, obliterating Zhu Hongming's head. Then he collected all the corpses. After retrieving the oil tank, he dumped the bodies inside, and also took the two heavy trucks. All traces of Zhu Hongming's group's presence were completely erased by him, unless someone searched the place where the oil tank was stored. The Chang family members, including the corporation's core personnel, security, and so on, are all living in the Chang family villa now. The security force has over 50 people. The core members are old Master Chang Baolong's old comrades who helped him build his empire, about 15 of them. They're basically a bunch of legitimized gangsters. They looted a police station before, so they have guns. All the core members are armed, and among the security team, only captain-level personnel can carry firearms. The Chang family's villa is huge, covering about 10 mu. Is that even a villa? It's clearly an estate. It's located in Dongshan, near Taihu Lake. Xiao Ran rubbed his nose. It was still quite a distance, especially at his current driving speed of only 20 kilometers per hour. Wouldn't it take him half a day to get there? However, the Chang family had someone with powers, and their villa seemed to be built to high standards. Otherwise, how could it withstand the current low temperatures, even with heating? If it was big enough, could he consider taking it over and moving his home there? Xiao Ran felt tempted. His own villa was good, but a bit small. It was already starting to feel a little crowded with 10 people living there. What if more people joined later? Besides, there was no place to walk his leopard. He had to use the freezing underground garage. Yes, I want this estate. Xiao Ran thought for a moment, but ultimately decided not to set out right away. It was just too far. It was already 3 in the afternoon. By the time he got there, who knew how late it would be? And even if he managed to take over the Chang family estate, the place was way too remote. Every time he needed to go into the city for fuel or supplies, he'd have to drive over 30 kilometers. That was just ridiculous. So, he decided to stockpile more fuel first. Right now, his biggest weakness was energy. Well, that and firepower. Ever since learning that the Chang family had ability users, Xiao Ran had developed a serious case of firepower anxiety. Maybe he should stock up on tens of thousands of kinetic rebar rounds, just in case. It was necessary. After all, the Chang family had over 100 people and access to firearms. He had to be cautious. First things first, head home. Xiao Ran turned back, making it back to his neighborhood just before the heavy fog began to roll in again. The streets were littered with corpses, frozen where they fell. Daytime temperatures had already plummeted to minus 40 degrees Celsius, and nights dropped to minus 60. The people of Sioux City were nowhere near prepared for this level of cold. Starving, thirsty, and freezing, some had tried to make a desperate dash for survival. Most didn't make it. They ended up as frozen corpses in the streets. Xiao Ran remained unfazed, his mind as calm as still water. Just death. It wasn't like he hadn't died before. Back at the neighborhood gate, he noticed some movement inside the security booth. A few people were in there, clutching kitchen knives and other makeshift weapons, but they were already dead, frozen solid. Likely, they'd planned to ambush him, hoping to rob him for supplies, but they hadn't lasted long enough for him to return. Hunger weakens the body, and with that comes an even lower tolerance for the cold. With a quick scan using his spatial awareness, Xiao Ran continued driving. The neighborhood was eerily quiet, like a ghost town. Was his family the only group of living people left? He didn't dwell on it. With extreme cold and no supplies, it was inevitable that 90% of humanity would die. 10 homes, 9 empty. That would be the new global norm, and it would last for a very, very long time. Without an environmental recovery, there would be no room for humanity to rest, heal, or even dream of returning to its former glory. That night, the neighborhood was unusually quiet. So quiet it left Xiao Ran a little bored. Fortunately, with more family members around now, there were games to play. The night passed without incident. Day 30 of the apocalypse. Somehow, an entire month had already gone by. Tomorrow would be July 1 SD. But there wasn't the slightest hint of summer in the air. Will we ever feel the sun's warmth again? Xiao Ran murmured. Today he would head out to look for more fuel. His goal: strip every gas station in Sioux City clean. With that much fuel, even if it didn't last a lifetime, it'd be enough for years. And once he had the energy, he could finally think about taking down the Chong family estate. He drove out of the neighborhood and followed his planned route, collecting fuel as he went. But plans rarely kept up with change. By the third gas station, he saw another group already busy gathering fuel. More the Chong family. If they were, he didn't mind taking them out. With each wave he eliminated, their numbers shrank. When it came time to storm their estate, resistance would be lighter and the risk lower. With that in mind, he stopped the car, opened the door, and stepped out. He moved casually, but the spatial gate had already opened in front of him. One of the workers spotted his vehicle and signaled to the others. They all turned to look, bundled in thick layers with cloth wrapped tightly around their faces, not to hide their identities, but to shield against the brutal cold. Every breath felt like a blade to the lungs. Their eyebrows were frosted white. A man whose features were hard to distinguish approached him and said, "We're from Sioux City's Hope Camp, an official organization. Identify yourself, or we'll be forced to take action." Official organization? Xiao Ran almost laughed. In times like these, was there really still such a thing? Even if some organization had survived, it was unlikely to be in Sioux City. Still, his curiosity was piqued. Hope Camp? What's that? The man answered, "Haven't you noticed this disaster? The extreme cold and toxic hail have made supplies scarce. Too many people are freezing, starving, dying of thirst. Years ago, the Sioux City government built an underground city, not big, but enough to house over 10,000 people. This underground city is what we call the Hope Camp. Hope, you get the meaning, right, kid? Because it's buried dozens of meters below the surface, the temperature inside is much higher than out here. The government stocked it with a ton of supplies, high-end equipment, and even top scientists. With their help, we believe we'll solve the poison water crisis and eventually get through all this. Right now, there are still some slots available. Do you want in?" Xiao Ran smiled. "And what's the prize for joining this Hope Camp?" The man nodded. "First, all resources are shared. No private property allowed. So, your car will be requisitioned. Of course, the organization won't just take it. You'll get extra food rations and a nicer room in exchange. Also, everyone contributes labor. After all, food doesn't just appear out of thin air." Xiao Ran shrugged. "Then forget it. I prefer a freer lifestyle." "Hey, kid." The man called out as Xiao Ran turned to leave. His eyes narrowed, and he stepped forward to block his path. Hope Camp represents the organization. It represents the nation. These are extraordinary times, and the organization needs your resources, and you won't cooperate. "So," Xiao Ran said with a chuckle, "getting desperate, are we?" The man gave a signal. The others stopped what they were doing and started closing in. Those who don't cooperate with the organization are traitors. And in extraordinary times, extraordinary measures are taken. Traitors are to be executed on the spot. Well, well, well. Xiao Ran looked at these people with a smirk, not bothering with any tough guy talk. There was no need. They dared to threaten him? In his eyes, they were already corpses. Since they were a group of dead men walking, why waste breath? Oh, right, he still needed to leave one alive for questioning. "Get him!" The man who had spoken earlier waved his hand, and the others instantly charged. None of them had guns, though. Wrenches and hammers were their weapons. Xiao Ran smiled. A dozen or so bullets shot out simultaneously. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Blood blossomed on each of their foreheads. They were dead through and through. Only one person was an exception, the man who had just threatened Xiao Ran. Xiao Ran spared him, not out of petty revenge. He wasn't that small-minded, but because this man looked like their leader and likely knew more. Why, woo? The man stammered, his words slurred from terror. Xiao Ran patted his shoulder. "Come on, let's talk in the car. It's too cold out here." Did the man dare refuse? He had no choice but to obediently get into the vehicle. "What's your name?" Xiao Ran asked. The man was first utterly astounded. How could it be so warm inside this car? They had also driven here, but they were all frozen to the bone. This car, however, was unbelievably warm. Different people, different cars? "My surname is Hua. I'm called Hua Mingli," the man said in a fawning tone. "Big brother, I was blind not to recognize a great man like yourself. Please be magnanimous. Don't lower yourself to my level. Just treat me like I'm nothing and let me go." Xiao Ran ignored his pleas. "All right, Let's talk about hope encampment. Yes, yes, no problem, Hua Mingli hurriedly replied, truly looking like someone who understood the gravity of the situation. With one asking and the other answering, Xiao Ran quickly got a clear picture of Hope Encampment's basic situation. In truth, Hope Encampment hadn't belonged to the government from the start. It was owned by a pharmaceutical group, one with foreign controlling interest. It had previously been an underground secret research and development center. As for what exactly they were researching, Hua Mingli didn't know. After the cataclysm, the R&D center seemed to have made a breakthrough in some experiment and urgently needed live human subject for clinical trials. Initially, due to the poisonous hail and dense fog, no one dared to leave. In fact, they couldn't. It wasn't until the poisonous hail stopped and the fog began to disperse during the day and reconsolidate at night that the R&D center sent people out. Their two main objectives were to find energy sources and to lure people back as test subjects. They used the name Hope Encampment and claimed it was a government-built facility, naturally, to make people believe them. However, as for the actual strength of this Hope Encampment, Hua Mingli had no idea. He was just a minor leader, completely unqualified to know deeper secrets, let alone core classified information. This R&D center is on Xishan Island. Xiao Ran couldn't help but rub his nose. The Chang family's manor was on Dongshan, Hope Encampment on Xishan. Did you guys coordinate this? Although Dongshan and Xishan were both in the Taihu Lake area, Xishan was an island, while Dongshan was not. The direct distance between them was very short. Given the current freezing temperatures, the lake's surface was naturally frozen solid. A hovercraft could go straight across. Why a hovercraft and not a snowmobile? Because a hovercraft had a cabin, which could block the wind and also accommodate a heating device, something a snowmobile couldn't offer. After you, Xiao Ran said, opening the car door for Hua Mingli to get out. Hua Mingli was stunned, not expecting Xiao Ran to let him go so easily. He quickly bowed and scraped his way out of the car, saying, thank you, thank you. I will never forget your magnanimity. Before he could finish his sentence, a bloody hole burst open on his forehead. He stared blankly at Xiao Ran, his eyes instantly flaring with venomous hatred, but then they immediately lost their light. Dead. That guy must have been cursing me wildly in his final moment, Xiao Ran thought with a faint smile. How could he possibly have let this man go? The Chang family manor, Hope Encampment. He sighed softly. As his range of activity increased, the scope of things he encountered had suddenly broadened considerably. In his previous life, how could he have known about these places or that superhumans even existed in the world? Being ordinary. Maybe that's a good thing too, he murmured, but then immediately shook his head. No, the ordinary only end up as meat on the chopping block, to be slaughtered at will. What kind of times are these? It's the law of the jungle. Without enough strength to protect yourself, when others come to kill you, they won't be polite, nor will they bother to negotiate. They won't even need a reason to kill these days. Xiao Ran cleaned up the scene, collected the fuel cans, and drove away. Because he had been delayed, Xiao Ran didn't visit all the gas stations he had planned for the day, instead heading home one stop earlier than scheduled. Sure enough, by the time he reached his house, the fog had begun to gather rapidly, soon becoming so thick you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Xiao Ran couldn't help but admire his own foresight. Back home, the women were eagerly awaiting his return. By now, their fates were completely intertwined with Xiao Ran's. If he were to unfortunately perish outside, they too would be trapped there, ultimately facing death. Therefore, more than anyone, they hoped for Xiao Ran's safe return. If you ask them, since Xiao Ran possessed countless supplies, did he really need to tire himself out going outside every day? He could totally just lie flat, play games with them, and such. That way, he'd be happy, they'd be happy, everyone would be happy. Well, perhaps Xiao Ran's kidneys might protest. When Xiao Ran got home, the women immediately started cooking. After more than half an hour, over a dozen dishes were laid out on the table. Time to eat. The meals at the Xiao household were incredibly lavish, even when compared to pre-apocalypse standards. After all, Xiao Ran had hoarded supplies worth around 3 billion, including many precious ingredients, perfect for the women to showcase their culinary skills. In truth, the women didn't have much else to do. Cooking helped pass the time. Nowadays, what humanity lacked most was time, and yet, what they often had in abundance was also time. Why was time scarce for most? Because without water or food, people constantly worried about starving or dying of thirst the next day, making every moment incredibly precious. But for wealthy individuals like Xiao Ran, they had too much time and had to rack their brains thinking of how to spend it. This was actually one of the reasons Xiao Ran wanted to venture out after the fog receded. In the same residential complex, two shadowy figures appeared at a window. From their vantage point, they could usually see Xiao Ran's villa. However, with the dense fog now, nothing was visible. Let's go inform the boss. Qianzhang, a homeowner in the complex. A few days ago, he'd risked venturing out to find his cousin, who was part of a construction crew. His purpose? To demolish Xiao Ran's villa, eliminate Xiao Ran, and take his place. He had a two-pronged plan. 1. Lure Xiao Ran out of the villa and kill him. 2. Simply blow the villa up. However, when Qianzhang returned to the complex, he found it had become a ghost town. Everyone was dead. Some were clearly murdered, but others had starved, died of thirst, or frozen to death. This both baffled and terrified him. And when he saw Xiao Ran emerge from the villa that morning, a chilling suspicion took root in his heart. Xiao Ran had killed them all. He didn't know what had happened, but the sheer number of deaths was a bloody, terrifying reality. Old Qian, are you sure there are a lot of supplies in the villa? Zhao Guojiang, who was beside him, asked. Qianzhang nodded emphatically. Absolutely, but you've seen it yourself. Look how many people used to be in this complex, and now I'm practically the only one left. I don't know what exactly happened, but I'm 99% sure it's because of that Xiao Ran. Cousin, I say we just forget it. Let's not risk our own lives, Zhao Guojiang said, a thoughtful look on his face. He then nodded. You're right, just the two of us. Even if we blew up the villa, we might not be able to beat that Xiao Ran. Come on, let's go back and find the boss. Qianzhang was naturally reluctant. If Zhao Guojiang's boss got involved, neither he nor Zhao Guojiang would have much say. Even if they successfully took the villa, how big a share would he get? Noticing his hesitation, Zhao Guojiang sneered. You said it yourself. Xiao Ran probably killed everyone in the complex. You were just thinking of backing out. Since you can't handle it alone, why not cooperate? Even if you don't get the meat, at least you can get a sip of this soup. Qianzhang was still hesitant. After all, the construction crew were a bunch of rough brutes. Who knew how long it had been since they'd been with a woman? If they got into the villa, beauties like Han Yun would surely be despoiled. He dreamed of that woman, whose every frown and smile exuded charm. He didn't want to sleep with a broken toy. But his cousin was right. Without more men, they couldn't possibly breach the villa. It would be like trying to scoop the moon from the water, utterly pointless. So he finally nodded. All right, as he said it, a wave of powerlessness washed over him. He now had no initiative, no bargaining power. Let's go find the boss. Zhao Guojiang was ready to leave immediately, but Qianzhang grabbed him. Are you crazy? The fog outside is so thick. Aren't you afraid of getting lost and freezing to death? Qianzhang said hastily. Zhao Guojiang smacked his own forehead. It's been 30 days since the cataclysm, and I still haven't gotten used to it. Then let's spend the night here. We'll go find a boss first thing tomorrow morning and get back before nightfall. Heh, then we'll take this place. Qianzhang nodded. Clang. A gust of cold wind blew the window open, and both men instantly shivered, hugging their arms. They quickly shut it. Oh, right? I need to warn you. Our boss isn't easy to deal with, Zhao Guojiang said, as if suddenly remembering something. It's fine for us old brothers, but you're an outsider. When you see our boss, you absolutely have to kneel first. Show your utmost subservience. Got it? The Qin dynasty fell ages ago, and you want me to kneel to someone? Qianzhang found it utterly unbelievable. Zhao Guojiang chuckled coldly. Our boss isn't an ordinary person. He's a superhuman. Qianzhang stared at his cousin as if he'd seen a ghost. He suddenly regretted seeking his cooperation. Look at him, already suffering from doomsday delusions, even babbling about superhumans. You don't believe me, do you? Zhao Guojiang said calmly. Actually, I didn't believe it at first either. Not until I saw our boss lead us into the contractor's complex and go on a killing spree. Only then did I realize that this world truly has Supermen, superhumans. Qianzhang's jaw dropped. He didn't know whether to believe Zhao Guojiang's nonsense or to think his cousin had finally snapped from the prolonged stress of the apocalypse. Hey, let me tell you about it. Seeing Qianzhang's expression, Zhao Guojiang began his story. In stark contrast to Qianzhang and Zhao Guojiang, who were suffering from hunger and cold, the atmosphere inside the villa was warm and vibrant. Xiao Ran was indulging in some role-playing, though it wasn't entirely pretend. Han Yun and Yu Nuantong really were teachers. Jiang Yuning, though an office worker, was indeed a police beauty, and Zhou Junsu and the others were actual university students. What was fake about it? So, One moment Xiao Ran was the innocent student secretly tasting forbidden fruit with his deskmate. The next, he was the audacious disciple challenging his teacher's boundaries. And with Han Yun, that stunning siren, she even added a line. "Where's my husband?" It was pure bliss. Faced with this apocalyptic reality, even Yu Nuantong and Jiang Yuning, who had the strongest moral compasses, cast off their inhibitions and indulged in pleasure. Fortunately, Xiao Ran had absorbed several more special abilities, further strengthening his body. Otherwise, he might not have been able to keep up. A night passed, and July 1st arrived, marking a new chapter of sorts. But the world remained unchanged, still shrouded in dark clouds, still gripped by extreme cold. While Xiao Ran and the others were still asleep, Qian Zhang and Zhao Guojiang seized the moment the fog lifted and immediately left the complex. They had strapped wooden planks to their feet and used 2 sticks as poles, creating makeshift skis to glide across the ice. After about 10 minutes, they found a sheltered spot to rest. Once recovered, they pressed on. The good news was their destination wasn't far. Another half-hour later, they reached a villa area. They entered and approached one of the houses. They knocked and went in, and a wave of warmth instantly washed over them. Qian Zhang and Zhao Guojiang felt as if they were reborn, quickly shedding their bulky coats. However, they still needed to wear sweaters. Taking off any more would mean freezing. In the living room, a fireplace blazed fiercely. Looking closely, they saw it was fueled by table legs and pieces of a smashed piano. No wonder it was so warm, though still no match for Xiao Ran's villa. That was understandable. Xiao Ran's villa had undergone an 80 million yuan renovation, where strengthening its structure and ensuring optimal insulation against the cold were top priorities. After all, who would have ever imagined the temperature in a place like Sioux City would plummet to minus 40 degrees Celsius, or even lower? "Old son, look, look," a man's voice drifted over. "Your daughter's developed so well. Haven't you ever thought of peeking while she's bathing?" What kind of depraved talk was that? Qian Zhang couldn't help but look over, and what he saw startled him. In the living room, there were 4 people, 2 men and 2 women. One of the men was kneeling, his hands and feet bound. He wore only a pair of boxer shorts, his body covered in wounds. His expression was utterly numb, his eyes devoid of light. The other man had his foot on the kneeling man's head, a cruel, perverse smile on his face. Of the 2 women, one was in her 40s, still possessing a mature charm, while the other was likely not yet 20, brimming with youth and vitality. They bore a strong resemblance, clearly mother and daughter. However, both mother and daughter were clad only in their underwear, their expressions just as numb, as if their souls had fled. Zhao Guojiang immediately said, "Boss." The only man standing glanced at Zhao Guojiang and asked impatiently, "What is it?" His name was Deng Hua. Zhao Guojiang nudged Qian Zhang, signaling frantically with his eyes. Although Qian Zhang was reluctant, seeing the plight of what seemed to be a family of 3, fear crept into his heart. He quickly knelt and said, "Boss, my name is Qian Zhang. I'm a homeowner in 9 Fortunes Complex. There's this guy there, Xiao Ran." He then launched into his story. When he finished, Deng Hua didn't even spare him a glance. "Little Zhao," he said, "get Bandit and the others to make a trip. Make sure you bring enough explosives. You're bothering me with such trivial matters." Yes, Zhao Guojiang quickly agreed. "I'll go find Bandit bro right away." With that, he tugged Qian Zhang, urging him to leave quickly. Leaving the villa, Zhao Guojiang led Qian Zhang towards another one. Despite the biting cold wind, Qian Zhang couldn't help his curiosity. "Cousin, what was all that about back there?" Zhao Guojiang chuckled darkly. "That family just now? They were the contractors for our construction team. They gave us work regularly, sure, but every time it came to payment, they'd drag their feet and find all sorts of excuses to dock our pay. Our boss, he's the team leader, had to grovel before them countless times just to get enough for us to live on. Once, when our boss went to demand payment, that bastard actually accused him of peeping at his wife while she was bathing and docked 20% of our money. Our boss couldn't take it anymore, beat him up, and ended up in jail for several months. Never mind the boss. Which one of us didn't hate that family's guts? Now our chance has come. That family is just reaping what they sowed." For a moment, Qian Zhang didn't know what to think. Did he have any right to judge Deng Hua? None. Wasn't he also scheming for someone else's house? Lusting after someone else's women? What was the difference? Besides, Deng Hua could at least claim it was for revenge. But him? Pure greed. So, he could only offer an awkward smile. The 2 of them had entered another villa, and this place. It was hard to describe. As soon as they stepped inside, They heard women's screams and moans, so shrill it sounded like hell on earth. Qianzhong understood immediately, even before Zhao Guojiang said anything. This gang of construction workers had stormed into this wealthy residential area, taking over everything. The women had become their playthings, tools for their gratification. In a way, this construction crew was no different from those brutes in Building 4 of the complex. And after the people in Building 4 were eliminated, these guys taking their place in the complex made no real difference either. So, although he felt a slight discomfort, the primal instincts deep within him stirred restlessly. Zhao Guojiang had found a disheveled man in one of the rooms. He looked to be in his 40s, a cigar dangling from his lips, holding a rope in his hand. As the two men came out, a woman crawled out after them. Qianzhong couldn't help but glance over. It was a woman in her 30s, quite pretty and well-maintained, looking 30 at most. Crucially, she was buxom with a full behind, a sight that ignited a fire in him, his desire flaring up. "Old Qian, this is our vice-captain, Wang Diyu, nicknamed Bandit. We all call him Bandit Bro," Zhao Guojiang introduced. Wang Diyu saw Qianzhang's eyes fixed on the woman and chuckled. "Want a turn?" Qianzhang snapped back to reality and quickly shook his head. "She's Bandit Bro's woman. How could I dare?" "Huh?" Wang Diyu roared with laughter. No problem at all. Didn't you say Xiao Ran's villa is hiding a bunch of top-tier beauties? Perfect. I'm getting a bit tired of this broad anyway, so you can have her. But if there are no beauties in that villa and you make us go on a wild goose chase, I'll rip out your tailbone and use it as a whip." Qianzhong jumped in fright and hurriedly said, I guarantee it. There are at least 2 stunners in Xiao Ran's villa. One was Han Yun, and the other, of course, Wang Lulu. Unfortunately, he probably wouldn't get to play with either of them now. Wang Diyu laughed heartily again. "Since the boss has spoken, let's get moving. We'd best take that villa before dark and bring back all the women and supplies." Qianzhong looked at the kneeling woman, couldn't help but swallow hard, and said, "Bandit Bro, you just said. Damn it, would I lie to you? Let's go. Business first. After it's done, you can do whatever you want with this woman." Wang Diyu said, annoyed. What could Qianzhong do but nod? He was alone. This was like walking into a wolf's den. How could he dare to object? He took one last look at the beautiful woman's full, perky behind, reluctantly tearing his eyes away before striding out of the room. He tried not to think about those enchanting vixens Han Yun and Wang Lulu. This woman, though a bit older, was someone he could only have dreamed of before. The thought that he could have his way with her when he returned filled him with fighting spirit. "Xiao Ran, you have to die. If you don't die, you're in my way, and you might even take my life." Soon after, a group of 15 men emerged from the wealthy residential complex, heading towards Nine Fortunes complex. Carrying explosives and other tools, their pace was much slower. It took them over an hour to reach their destination. They first observed the area, but with the weather so cold, they couldn't take measurements or anything similar, only make a rough estimate. Then, they went to the underground garage and began planting explosives against the villa's wall. "Old Qian, what are you spacing out for? Let's go." After the explosives were set, Zhao Guojiang saw Qianzhong still standing there dumbfounded and pulled him. Qianzhong was a bit confused. "Are you stupid?" Zhao Guojiang said, pulling him along. "When this thing blows, the whole garage could collapse. You want to be buried alive down there." Only then did Qianzhong realize the danger, and he quickened his pace, breaking into a run. Once everyone was clear, Wang Diyu began the countdown. 3, 2, 1, detonate. Boom. Thanks to the insider, Qianzhong, the demolition team deliberately avoided the surveillance cameras in the passageway when planting the explosives. Thus, Xiao Ran was completely unaware of any of it. Boom! The fuse burned down, and the explosives detonated with a deafening roar. The shockwave instantly snapped the 2 nearest load-bearing pillars. The underground garage immediately split open, turning that section into an open-air pit. A massive amount of bricks, stones, and debris rained down, completely blocking the villa's passage to the garage. This colossal explosion was earth-shattering, deafening. Yet, for those inside the villa, it merely felt like a slight tremor, and the sound wasn't very loud, akin to a firecracker. One could only say the villa's defenses were incredibly robust, and its soundproofing exceptionally good. What happened? An earthquake? The women were all a little nervous. The environment was already harsh. If an earthquake struck now, even with Xiao Ran's endless supplies, they wouldn't be able to withstand it. Xiao Ran picked up his phone and pulled up the surveillance feed for the underground passage, but all 3 camera screens were black. Broken. These were infrared cameras. Even in complete darkness, they should capture something, not be pitch black. So, They were definitely destroyed. Xiao Ran rushed to the window and looked out. Holy crap! The ground had split open, revealing the garage below. An earthquake? Absolutely not. Only the area around the villa was like this. The distant ice sheet remained intact, without a single crack. So, someone was using explosives. Xiao Ran's eyes narrowed. Who did this? Thankfully, he had modified the villa, significantly upgrading its defense level. Otherwise, would a villa with merely an added insulation layer have withstood this blast? It would have been destroyed for sure. This was murder and robbery. Xiao Ran scanned his surroundings. Since there was an explosion, the perpetrators would surely follow, attempting to enter through the breached opening of the villa. If he wasn't dead, they'd finish him off, plunder all the supplies, and take all the women. A murderous aura emanated from Xiao Ran. This attack was truly unexpected. Sure enough, he then saw a group of people rush out from the nearest building, heading towards the villa. He saw Xinjiang. Although he couldn't recall the man's name, he looked somewhat familiar, definitely one of the community's homeowners. So, they had brought in outside help. Xiao Ran sneered and quickly descended to the ground floor. After the explosion, Wang Deyu and his group had waited only a few seconds before rushing out. They were afraid that if the villa was breached, the cold wind would sweep in and freeze the beautiful women to death. Charge! Because Xinjiang had described the beauty of Han Yun and Wang Lulu, these men were filled with lust, eager to take the beauties back and enjoy them. Deng Hua was an oddball, finding pleasure in tormenting the contractor's family and having no interest in other women, devoted to an appalling degree. Therefore, exquisite beauties like Han Yun and Wang Lulu would naturally be theirs to enjoy. Naturally, everyone charged forward bravely for their own sake. However, when they reached the front of the villa, they were all dumbfounded. The villa was actually intact. What the hell? Only some of the facade and a few tiles had fallen off. Staring at the metal layer beneath the outer wall, they plunged into deep self-doubt. Are rich people these days all so damn eccentric? What kind of construction standards were these? I must be f***ing crazy. The group stared blankly at the almost unscathed villa, a storm of curses raging in their minds. What now? Go back and get more explosives? Even more explosives? Just then, with a click, the villa's main door actually opened. Opened? Well, yeah. After such a powerful explosion, unless the people inside had taken sleeping pills and were out like logs, they'd surely come out to see what happened, right? What's the difference between blasting an entrance with explosives and the owner opening the door himself? Go! Wang Deyu immediately waved his hand, and a dozen men charged forward. Only Xinjiang was an exception. He felt an inexplicable fear toward Xiao Ran. This saved his life, at least for now. Xiao Ran, exuding a murderous aura, opened his spatial portal. Swish, swish, swish. Kinetic steel rebars shot out, piercing each man through the face, then continuing through the ice layer, embedding themselves firmly. And so, 13 corpses, impaled by steel bars, appeared at the villa's entrance. None lay flat. Each was contorted in a bizarre and terrifying manner. Wang Deyu was so terrified his soul nearly left his body. Oh no, this man is an ability user, just like the boss. Run. How could he possibly warn Xinjiang? He turned and fled instantly, but, in his haste, slipped and fell, the pain almost bringing tears to his eyes. Fortunately, he was bundled up tightly, and no bare skin touched the ice. Otherwise, he would have been infected by toxins, the pain so severe he wouldn't have been able to get up, and he would have frozen to death right there. But by the time he scrambled to his feet, a figure was already standing before him. You dare bomb my house, and think you can just run away? Xiao Ran's voice was light, seemingly calm, yet concealed a profound, killing intent. Wang Deyu was on the verge of tears. Xinjiang, you bastard! You didn't say Xiao Ran was also an ability user. Otherwise, he wouldn't have come here even if it killed him. At the very least, he would only have dared to come under Deng Hua's leadership. Without guns or cannons, how could they fight an ability user with just cold weapons? It was pure suicide. Boss, I was misled into coming here, so recklessly. Please show some mercy. Oh, right, our boss is an ability user too, just like you. He uses the same kind of powers you just did, except our boss can transform into metal, he hurriedly said. Firstly, to adopt a subservient posture, and secondly, to bring up Deng Hua, hoping to intimidate Xiao Ran. An ability user against an ability user could very well result in mutual destruction. You wouldn't want that, would you? A thought struck Xiao Ran. He said to Wang Deyu and Xinjiang, get inside. Helpless, the two men entered the villa. The moment they stepped through the door, They both felt as if they were stepping into hell. But did they dare disobey? However, once inside, both men were stunned. So warm. And holy hell, so many drop-dead, gorgeous women. My God, apart from two who were slightly less striking, the other 7 were all absolute stunners. Not only were their faces exquisite, but their figures were also to die for. Schoolgirl outfits, office lady uniforms. Heavens, this was an enjoyment fit for an emperor. Xiao Ran actually spent every day with these stunning women. How have you not been drained dry? Are you even a man? Even in this situation, they couldn't help but greedily scan the women's bodies, wishing they had more eyes. Otherwise, after looking at a face, they want to see the chest. After the chest, they want to see the waist, legs, and butt. They simply couldn't take it all in fast enough. Xiao Ran coughed. Tell me about your boss. His voice was icy, jolting Wang Diyu and Qian Zhang back to their senses. Wang Diyu spoke first. After he finished, Qian Zhang continued. Xiao Ran naturally understood the whole story. He said to Qian Zhang, walk forward. What did that mean? Although Qian Zhang didn't understand, he didn't dare to disobey. So, he walked forward. And then, he was simply gone. He vanished on the spot. Wang Dayu's eyes nearly popped out. You call that an ability? That's straight-up magic. Xiao Ran smiled faintly. Describe Deng Hua's ability in detail. Also, when did he get it, and how? Wang Diyu recalled for a moment, then said, Boss got his ability on the 7th day after the cataclysm. I don't know the specifics because Boss never said, and we didn't dare ask. But Boss almost died before he got his ability. Xiao Ran seemed to have grasped a key point. Tell me in detail. Wang Diyu explained that on the 5th day after the cataclysm, Deng Hua was starving and decided to venture out to find supplies. But the toxic hail hadn't stopped yet. Although he made preparations before going out, he was still hit by the hail. However, the man's willpower was terrifying. He actually endured the agony of the poison, searing his body, and managed to run back. As a result, he lay in bed for 2 days and 2 nights, during which his fever once spiked to 44 degrees Celsius. For a normal person, their brain and internal organs would have been cooked. But not only did he survive, he pulled through and even gained an ability. And just like that, they became a force to be reckoned with. Xiao Ran couldn't help but ponder. Ever since discovering the mutated husky, he knew he wasn't the only one with abilities. Xiao Ran had been mulling over one question. How exactly are abilities generated? Why do some people have them and others don't? Combining his own experience with the process of Deng Hua gaining his ability, he formed 2 hypotheses. First, one might need to be hit by the toxic hail. He himself had been hit by it once, a searing, stinging pain. But at that time, he didn't know Zhang Jie wasn't his real son. His only thought was to protect his son, so he endured the excruciating pain and ran back home. Yes, he had also developed a fever, not a high one, but a persistent low-grade fever that hadn't subsided even by the day he was to be butchered and eaten by the Zhang family. Second, a near-death experience might be necessary. Possessing a powerful obsession, a desperate will to live, could trigger an overwhelming survival instinct, thereby awakening. An ability? Was it the first point, the second, or were both required? There were too few samples to be certain, but Xiao Ran felt he was close, that the answer lay somewhere within these possibilities. I'll have to investigate further when I encounter other ability users in the future, Xiao Ran thought to himself. Unfortunately, he had actually encountered 2 other ability users, Yang Wenxi and Song Hui, but had no chance to interrogate them. At that time, Xiao Ran was solely focused on eliminating them. Ability users were too dangerous. Given the chance, he would neutralize them immediately. Giving them an opportunity would be toying with his own life, wouldn't it? If that was the case, Xiao Ran would rather remain ignorant of the secret behind human abilities or learn of it later than take such a risk. Knowing later wouldn't kill him, but giving other ability users a chance truly could. Xiao Ran continued his questioning, primarily about the extent of Deng Hua's power. However, Deng Hua rarely used his ability, so Wang Diyu wasn't very clear on the details. But one thing was certain. Deng Hua had never absorbed anyone else's ability. They had been lording it over everyone in that affluent residential complex, only occasionally venturing out for supplies, so they'd never had the chance to encounter another ability user. Well, Xiao Ran was that second ability user, and this was the outcome. After Xiao Ran finished his questions, he gave Wang Diyu a push. The man stumbled involuntarily into the spatial gate and vanished instantly. This left Han Yun and the other women both shocked and terrified. A living, breathing person, gone just like that. They were naturally grateful to Xiao Ran, because without him, they wouldn't have their current comfortable lives. But more than gratitude, they felt fear. This was their man, and also the master who held their lives in his hands. It was only because Xiao Ran wasn't a tyrant that he didn't make them live like slaves. But this didn't change the fundamental nature of their relationship. They were Xiao Ran's kept canaries. Xiao Ran never hid this aspect of their relationship, and he certainly wasn't trying to manipulate them. You offer your bodies, I provide a comfortable life. It's a transaction. Xiao Ran paid no mind to the women's reactions and instead became lost in thought. Should he launch a counterattack now? Others had already brought the fight to his doorstep. Even though Xiao Ran hadn't suffered any losses with his personality, how could he swallow this insult? Moreover, Wang Diyu and his men had met their end here. The feud was established. How could it possibly be resolved peacefully? Instead of waiting for others to attack, it was better for him to strike first and seize the initiative. Today, right now, Xiao Ran made up his mind and immediately checked the map. It was indeed very close. Hung Ren Gardens, a well-known affluent residential complex, was only 4 kilometers away. Driving, even if Xiao Ran maintained a safe speed of 20 kilometers per hour, about 12 miles per hour, it would only take a mere 12 minutes. Move out. Xiao Ran told the women to wait and went to the ground-level garage. Fortunately, the earlier explosion hadn't been near the garage, so the road outside was still smooth. Otherwise, Xiao Ran would have had to walk some distance before retrieving his car from his dimensional space. Leaving his own complex, he headed towards Hung Ren Gardens. 15 minutes later, he arrived at his destination. He didn't park the car at the main entrance of the complex, but a short distance away. He also didn't go through the main gate. Instead, he took a ladder from his dimensional space and climbed directly over the wall. The goal was to catch them by surprise. Deng Hua was in Villa No. 3. Xiao Ran had already confirmed this on the map. He stealthily made his way over. Would Deng Hua's group still bother posting lookouts now? Probably not. Who were they guarding against? But Xiao Ran remained extremely cautious, moving as silently as possible and sticking close to the walls. It took him some time to reach the door of Villa No. 3. He knocked. Who is it? Someone asked from inside. Xiao Ran had already ascertained the situation. There were 2 men guarding the door in Villa No. 3, plus Deng Hua and the 3 original homeowners, a total of 6 people. You don't even recognize my voice? Xiao Ran said deliberately in an annoyed tone. Vegas sent me. I have news for the boss. Open up quick. It's freaking freezing out here. His urgent tone seemed to dispel any suspicion from the person inside. After all, who would be wandering around outside in this kind of weather? Weren't they afraid of freezing to death? So where would an enemy come from? The next moment, with a click, the door opened. Xiao Ran nodded slightly. If it hadn't opened up, he was prepared to smash the door down with a rock. This way was better, of course, as it avoided alerting Deng Hua. In a direct confrontation, he wasn't afraid of any ability user. With a spatial gate open in front of him, what the hell did he have to fear? In fact, he had already opened the spatial gate right next to the door. Even when dealing with small fry, he wouldn't let his guard down. After all, if he was caught unaware, a single bullet could end his life. The door opened. Behind it stood an unfamiliar man. He of course saw Xiao Ran now. Even though Xiao Ran had half his face covered, the man instantly recognized he wasn't one of them and immediately opened his mouth to shout a warning. PhD. A bullet went straight through his right eye and into his brain, but its kinetic energy wasn't enough to pierce through his skull and exit. Gurgle, gurgle. Blood gushed wildly from his eye socket. The man stared blankly at Xiao Ran with his one remaining eye, his body falling backward. Dead. Xiao Ran opened a spatial portal directly beneath him. So, the man vanished abruptly halfway through his fall. Lao Zhang, who's here? Someone asked, walking over. He suddenly saw Xiao Ran, and his nonchalant expression instantly turned grim. But he had no time to raise an alarm. The next moment, a similar bullet took care of him. The man fell, then disappeared. Sound? Barely a whisper. Xiao Ran walked through the entryway and into the living room. There was a sound like whipping. Xiao Ran glanced around. No one was in the living room. It was coming from upstairs. Huh, they're even having their fun upstairs? Xiao Ran silently went upstairs. As he reached the 2nd floor, the sounds grew louder, and he could also hear painful screams. A door was ajar. Xiao Ran used his spatial perception. If the door had been closed, Xiao Ran wouldn't have been able to sense anything, but with it ajar, it was different. Crystal clear. In the room, a man lay on the floor, his limbs bound. It had to be the actual homeowner, Sun Junjie. Right now, his chin was propped up by 3 books, forcing his head up and making him look forward. What was in front of him? Another man, clearly Deng Hua, was whipping two women. One was Sun Junjia's wife, the other his daughter. Their bodies were covered in wounds, a shocking sight. The mother and daughter were both of the fuller type. Their waists weren't particularly slim, but their curves were still visible. Their looks were decent. In fact, the mother was a cut above, barely scoring 75, while the daughter was around 70, but they could still be called beauties. Deng Hua seemed tired. He stopped and said to Sun Junjia, "If you want your wife and daughter to suffer less, you know what to say, right?" Sun Junjia's face was contorted in pain, but he still managed to say, "Please, please, just come at me." "Ha ha." Deng Hua laughed, walking over. Then, grabbing Sun Junjia by the neck, he said, "Back when you made things difficult for me, did you ever imagine this day would come? I swore back then that one day I'd definitely screw you hard." Arg. Sun Junjia let out a pig-like squeal, filled with unspeakable humiliation. Xiao Ran shivered, his spatial perception immediately cutting off. But Sun Junjia's screams continued unabated. Damn it, that burns my eyes. How could he have ever imagined he'd witness a scene of a man taking another man by force? Now Xiao Ran believed what Wang Diyu had said. Sun Junjia had indeed falsely accused Deng Hua of peeking at his wife bathing. If it had been Sun Junjia himself, Deng Hua might have actually peeked, maybe even dropped the soap. No wonder the other members of the construction team were causing trouble all over the residential complex. But Deng Hua only targeted Sun Junjia's family. Turns out, he wasn't interested in women at all. Deng Hua definitely didn't want his subordinates to know his preferences. Combined with his hatred for Sun Junjia, he was happy to stay here, taking pleasure in tormenting this family, especially Sun Junjia, to vent his perverted desires. The apocalypse is here, and all sorts of freaks are crawling out of the woodwork. If Xiao Ran had his way, he really wouldn't want to touch a guy like that, one who preyed on other men. But what could be done? Deng Hua possessed an ability. To become stronger, I'll stomach dealing with you this once. Xiao Ran activated his spatial perception again. After confirming Deng Hua's position, he immediately kicked the door in. Swish, swish, swish. A dozen or so energized rebar rods shot out. And even faster than a rebar were a dozen or so bullets. Fuck. Although the bullets were fast, ability users generally had a preternatural sense of danger. Deng Hua's instincts reacted even faster than his conscious mind. His body instantly gleamed with golden light, actually transforming into a metal man. The problem was, he wasn't stationary. So, Sun Junjia was out of luck. He really got wrecked down there. Arg. He let out an incomparably painful scream, but it was cut short immediately because Xiao Ran, in his attempt to kill Deng Hua, had used a saturation attack. The kill zone was a bit large and had included him. So he was directly hit in the head by a stray bullet. It was for the best, because next, two rebar rods pierced through his body, sparing him further pain. "Who the hell are you?" Deng Hua demanded, utterly shocked. If it were just bullets, he naturally wouldn't have found it strange. But the combination of bullets and rebar was too bizarre. He couldn't help but be alarmed. How could Xiao Ran possibly stop to talk? This was a life-or-death battle, not some hot-blooded manga where they had to spout a bunch of bullshit. Swish, swish, swish. He continued to fire rebar rods. Why rebar and not bullets? Because he found that Deng Hua wasn't very fast and couldn't possibly dodge the rebar shots. On the other hand, rebar actually had more kinetic energy than bullets. Third, rebar was easier to obtain and could be reused. Fourth, rebar could also serve to obstruct movement. With all these factors combined, Xiao Ran naturally used rebar for his attacks. Clang, clang, clang. All the rebar rods struck Deng Hua's body, sending sparks flying. But after taking the impacts, Deng Hua's body only showed dents. The skin wasn't broken, much less did any blood spurt out. It was as if he were a robot. So badass to be able to tank bullets and energized rebar with his body. Even Xiao Ran couldn't do that. However, Deng Hua was suffering in silence, because abilities were limited. Usually, he only metallized parts of his body to kill, break down doors, or torture people. Sun Junjia had experienced this firsthand. Even so, he could only sustain it for about 10+ minutes. Now, having metallized his entire body, the duration he could use it would be reduced 100-fold. How many seconds was that? A little over 10. Once his ability ran out, he would revert to being an ordinary person. How could an ordinary person block such an attack? He wanted to beg for mercy. He wouldn't even mind calling Xiao Ran dad or grandpa. But would Xiao Ran give him the chance? Damn it, he didn't even know who Xiao Ran was. Right from the start, it was an incredibly fierce assault aimed straight at taking his life. It was just too much. Thwack. How long could 10 odd seconds last? Deng Hua's golden body was finally broken. A rebar rod pierced his chest. He knew he couldn't escape his fate and asked unwillingly, "Just who are you? Why are you?" Thwack! Before he could finish his sentence, a dozen more rebar rods struck him one after another, turning him into a human porcupine. Why bother gloating to a dying man? A thoroughly dead corpse is a good corpse. Xiao Ran quickly moved forward to absorb the ability while it was fresh. He was worried the ability would dissipate if too much time passed. This was no time to take chances. A warm current washed over him. Invigorating. Xiao Ran absorbed the special ability, his body trembling slightly. He could clearly feel his spatial abilities rapidly strengthening. The spatial gate opened, reaching a size of 25 by 25 meters. This was truly astonishing. To put 25 meters into perspective, considering an average floor is 3 meters high, this was equivalent to an 8-story building, plus a little extra. It was that immense both horizontally and vertically, simply terrifying. However, the spatial gate could still only be opened beyond 4 meters, which disappointed Xiao Ran somewhat. He'd hoped for at least 10 meters or so. Oh well, never mind. His spatial awareness range, on the other hand, had steadily expanded by another 2 meters, reaching its limit of 10 meters. With his current total amount of special energy, he could probably sustain continuous use for half an hour. Awesome. Wait a minute. Xiao Ran realized that some kind of change seemed to be brewing within his body. But it was like a seed, on the verge of sprouting, yet still unable to break through its outer shell. It made Xiao Ran scratch his head in frustration, feeling a bit frantic. Was this a new ability? So, was this state due to a lack of life or death pressure, or had he not absorbed enough special energy yet? Xiao Ran pondered. Unfortunately, there wasn't another special ability user around. Otherwise, absorbing one more ability should confirm whether it was an insufficient amount of energy or a lack of life or death pressure. A woman's voice suddenly sounded. Xiao Ran glanced up. It was the mother of the mother-daughter duo. Her beautiful face was filled with fear as she looked at him timidly. "Speak," he said in a low voice. The woman mustered her courage and said, "Thank you for saving me and my daughter. Thank you so much." This woman is quite clever, Xiao Ran thought to himself. She didn't mention that he had killed her husband. Though Xiao Ran's target hadn't been Sun Junjie, it was an accidental kill. In reality, if Xiao Ran had been a bit more careful, a bit more attentive, he could have avoided Sun Junjie. But he hadn't. At that time, he was focused on killing Deng Hua. Accidental kills? So be it. He wasn't exactly a good person. But Sun Junjie's wife deliberately avoided this point, and instead thanked Xiao Ran for saving them. Who would save someone only to kill them afterward? This woman was shrewd. Which wealthy person isn't a bit calculating? Except for the nouveau riche, of course. Aren't I nouveau riche myself? Am I cursing myself? The corner of Xiao Ran's mouth twitched slightly. He said to the beautiful woman, "No need. I didn't intend to save you anyway. May I ask who you are?" The beautiful woman asked again. Xiao Ran was experiencing the strengthening of his physical body, but compared to the previous change, this one wasn't as intense. This was understandable. The first time was the most intense, going from 1 to 2, a 100% increase. The second time, from 2 to 3, although it also increased by 1, the percentage increase was 50%. The third time, 3 became 4, only a 33% improvement, and this time it had dropped to 25%. This meant his body was getting progressively stronger, and the same amount of enhancement had a less dramatic effect on him. Lost in thought, Xiao Ran casually replied, "Police." "Police?" The mother and daughter exchanged a look. They were somewhat skeptical because Xiao Ran had acted too ruthlessly and decisively, completely disregarding the hostage's life in his bid to kill Deng Hua, even including Sun Junjie in the collateral damage. However, the two women were somewhat inclined to believe him. After all, given the current times, it wasn't entirely incomprehensible if the police adopted a more aggressive style. The daughter, not being very bright, immediately cried out, "If you're a policeman, why didn't you save my dad? Also, we're starving. Hurry up and get us something to eat." Xiao Ran glanced at her, a faint smile playing on his lips. No wonder Deng Hua had retaliated against this family so fiercely. One look at the daughter's attitude made it clear. The moment she assumed he was a policeman, her attitude instantly became arrogant and condescending. If she was like this now, the Sun family's attitude towards Deng Hua back then must have been 10, even 100 times worse. The mother was smarter. She quickly stopped her daughter and said to Xiao Ran with an apologetic smile, "Sir, my daughter is young and doesn't know any better. Please don't take offense. Officer, my daughter and I are really starving. Could you please give us something to eat? Xiao Ran patted his pockets and retorted, Do I look like I'm carrying food? If you don't have any, can't you go find some? The daughter blurted out. This time, the mother didn't stop her daughter. Instead, she also looked at Xiao Ran with expectant eyes. Seeing Xiao Ran just standing there, motionless, a hint of impatience, even anger, crept into her gaze. Used to being a lady of status, accustomed to ordering people around, such habits wouldn't change just from being a prisoner for a few days. Xiao Ran, however, broke into a smile and shook his head. Suddenly, with two soft fut sounds, blood blossomed on the foreheads of both mother and daughter. They died instantly, their expressions almost frozen in place. This mother and daughter knew his secret, so naturally, they had to be silenced. He had no intention of taking these two into his home. He found them distasteful. Still, I let them blabber on for so long instead of finishing them off right away. I'm still not ruthless enough. It's the apocalypse. I need to be colder, more merciless. So what if they're innocent? If their innocence leads to my secret being exposed and ultimately my death, then am I not innocent too? Xiao Ran. Oh, Xiao Ran, you need to be more selfish. Innocent people who knew his secret had to die, because it could potentially cost him his life. So, what was wrong with being more selfish? In fact, with such immense power, Xiao Ran not actively committing evil was already the greatest kindness. So what if he occasionally killed a few innocent people by mistake? Thinking this, a smile touched his lips. In this apocalypse, he would be as selfish as he pleased. Now, to eradicate evil completely and leave no loose ends. Xiao Ran walked out of the villa and headed towards the nearest one. Arriving at the door, he knocked lightly. Who is it? Someone inside asked after a moment. Delivery. Huh. Bang. The very next instant, with a loud crash, the main door was smashed open. No, not just opened, but the entire door was knocked down, because a large rock had slammed into it, completely destroying the bolt and everything else. Arg, a loud scream erupted, coming from beneath the door. The person who had opened it was crushed underneath, likely suffering severe injuries. Blood could be seen seeping out from the edges of the door panel. Moreover, pinned by the heavy rock, the person had no way of pushing the door off. With each exhale, their chest was compressed further, making the next breath even harder to draw. It was like being constricted by a python. Each breath brought them closer to death, until they finally suffocated. At this moment, a group of people rushed out from inside the villa. A crowd rushed out. Seeing the fallen door and the faint outline of an arm pinned underneath, they first froze, then collectively erupted in anger. What fool dares to cause trouble on our turf? Get him! Instantly, the group charged barehanded. There had been no time to grab weapons. A thought crossed Xiao Ran's mind. Should he practice some close combat fighting techniques? What if he needed such a skill in the future? It's better to have it and not need it, than to need it and not have it. Mainly, he had seen with his spatial perception that these people truly had no weapons. So, with his current physical strength, did he really have anything to fear from them? Xiao Ran cracked his knuckles. Bring it on. Thwack. Bam. Pow. Wham. A close-quarters brawl erupted. Although Xiao Ran was alone against 7 opponents, a clear case of being outnumbered, he wasn't at a disadvantage. In fact, it was almost too easy for him. Every punch he threw was fast, accurate, and heavy. No one could dodge, and anyone who took a hit would stumble back several steps before collapsing to the ground, their faces contorted in pain. Xiao Ran had absorbed 4 abilities, and being an ability user himself, his body had been enhanced a total of 5 times. Though he hadn't tested it, he estimated his explosive power was immense. After all, he could effortlessly carry 2 of the 9 women with 1 arm, or lift 4 people simultaneously without breaking a sweat. Who wouldn't be floored by such a punch? In less than half a minute, 7 people were lying on the ground. Xiao Ran rubbed his side. Though he'd quickly dispatched all opponents, he had taken a couple of hits. But his physique was too formidable. Attacks from ordinary people using only fists and feet would, at most, cause him a fleeting sting of pain, never any real damage. As expected, not professional fighters. Their skills are too crude. Xiao Ran shook his head, dissatisfied with his own performance. He could crush these people effortlessly, not because his fighting skills were superior, but purely due to his overwhelming strength. You hit me, I'm unfazed. I hit you, you're half dead. Naturally, it was a one-sided rout. If I encounter a martial arts expert in the future, I should ask for some pointers. Xiao Ran searched the villa. He found only 3 women, lying in bed, only their faces and hair visible, their expressions numb. It was clear the construction crew had used them for their pleasure. Xiao Ran didn't kill them. He hadn't used his abilities, nor had he shown his face. He'd kept it well covered due to the cold. He wasn't a murderous maniac, thinking about killing at every turn. However, even if he didn't act in their current state, these three women wouldn't live for more than a few days. Swoosh! His eyes began to turn red, and a fire ignited within him. Not good. The side effects of absorbing abilities were kicking in. Xiao Ran glanced at the three women and couldn't help but shudder. Forget it. These three are absolutely not an option. Even though they were innocent and forced, Xiao Ran couldn't bring himself to it. He was genuinely repulsed. If I'd known, I wouldn't have killed the son, family, mother, and daughter. At least they hadn't been defiled by others, right? Forget it, forget it. What's done is done. Why dwell on it? Xiao Ran pushed the door open and went out. There should be other women here, right? I could try my luck. Besides, I can still suppress it for now. He went in the third villa. Kill, kill, kill. He broke into 8 villas in a row, killing a total of 31 people. Although there were women in every villa, each one had been abused beyond recognition. Xiao Ran had no interest. Then, he went to the 9th villa. He knocked on the door. Get lost. An angry man's roar came from inside. I'm warning you. I have a weapon. Don't force me to fight to the death. Huh? Xiao Ran paused. The tone didn't sound like that of a villain. It was more like a resident of the complex who mistook him for one of the construction crew's thugs. It's just, that voice sounded vaguely familiar. Xiao Ran wouldn't be careless. Once he acted, he couldn't leave loose ends. As the saying went, better to mistakenly kill 10,000 than to let a single one slip through. Besides, this voice stirred a deep-seated hatred from his past. Bang! He kicked out, but embarrassingly, despite his immense strength, he failed to kick the door open. Instead, the impact made his foot ache. Damn it. However, this made Xiao Ran even more convinced that the occupants weren't the construction crew thugs, but the original owners. The door was too sturdy. That's how it had withstood those thugs. But even if there was only the slightest chance, Xiao Ran had to make sure. With a thought, a large rock instantly flew out from his dimensional space, slamming heavily against the door. However, the door wasn't breached. Again, Xiao Ran reached out, retrieved the rock, and then summoned a second kinetic stone from his space. Release, retrieve. Release, retrieve. After just a dozen or so impacts, Xiao Ran managed to smash the door open. This door was definitely custom-made. Otherwise, given the terrifying power of the kinetic stones, a single one would have blasted through a normal door. His previous experiences prove this. But this door required over a dozen stones to break. If it wasn't custom-made, what else could it be? Crash! The door fell, but Xiao Ran immediately retrieved the stone. About 3 meters behind the doorway stood a man holding a kitchen knife, trying to look fierce, but his trembling hands betrayed him. He was scared stiff. Huh, it's quite warm in the room. Xiao Ran was slightly surprised. It wasn't out of the question for a wealthy family to have installed a fireplace on a whim, but a month had already passed. Whose firewood supply would still last? The key was this household obviously couldn't go out, so the source of their supplies was interesting. Because it was warm enough, the man opposite him was actually wearing thick winter pajamas. Although the room was much warmer than outside, it was barely above freezing, not like Xiao Ran's villa, which was warm enough to go shirtless. Still, Xiao Ran could see the man's appearance clearly enough. Chunghua. The man opposite him froze for a moment. Who are you? How would those thugs recognize him? Oh, they must have interrogated other residents to get information. Xiao Ran, meanwhile, unhurriedly lifted the door panel, propped it back in the doorway, and braced it with a table to prevent it from falling. Throughout this, he kept his spatial gate open behind him. If Chunghua dared to rush him with a knife, he would go straight into the dimensional space. Unfortunately, Chunghua didn't have the guts. With the door closed, the biting cold immediately lessened considerably. Xiao Ran turned around and saw a woman next to Chunghua. She was a beautiful young woman with a truly excellent figure. Though also in thick winter pajamas, her chest was prominent, clearly well-endowed. She also held a kitchen knife, but unlike Chunghua, her hands weren't shaking, and her gaze was much firmer. Xiao Ran smiled faintly and took off his hat. Xiao Ran. Who was Chunghua? He was the class president of Xiao Ran's high school class. However, his grades weren't that great. He only became class president because his family was rich. After graduating high school, he went to Australia to study abroad. Later, a few years later, Chunghua sent out an invitation in the class group chat, inviting old classmates to his wedding. Xiao Ran didn't go, because he couldn't go empty-handed, but his entire salary was handed over, leaving him with only 200 yuan a month for pocket money. How could he possibly afford the customary gift money? So he had to skip it. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect to run into an old classmate here. Xiao Ran, how can it be you? Cheng Hua was also very surprised. The person who had just barged in was actually a high school classmate. Xiao Ran smiled faintly and said, "Oh, just wandering around. Happened to end up here. Wandering around, my ass." Cheng Hua thought, in this kind of weather, you're telling me you're just wandering around? Of course, Cheng Hua didn't believe him. Something suddenly occurred to him, and his heart tightened. He quickly brandished the kitchen knife in his hand. "You're one of those thugs trying to use our old classmate connection to make me lower my guard and steal my property. Well, you've got a rich imagination. Too bad it's misplaced," Xiao Ran thought, then feigned surprise. "Just now, I checked villa after villa and found bodies everywhere. Those thugs you mentioned, they're probably all dead." Huh? Both Cheng Hua and the young woman showed shocked expressions, but the next moment, Cheng Hua pointed the kitchen knife at Xiao Ran. "Are you lying to me?" He was skeptical. Were those thugs really dead? How'd they die? Was it possible? The young woman, however, said, "You my husband's classmate?" Xiao Ran nodded. Xiao Ran, Cheng Hua's high school classmate. The young woman smiled, a captivating charm in her expression, and made an inviting gesture. "My name is Sun Jia. It's cold at the door. Come inside and sit." Cheng Hua grew anxious and whispered in his wife's ear, "What if he's one of their accomplices?" Sun Jia shot her husband a look and also whispered, "The door's already been broken down. If he really is one of those thugs' accomplices, could we even stop him?" True. Cheng Hua, resigned, had no choice but to say, "Come on in, have a seat." Seeing Xiao Ran about to walk straight in, he quickly said, "Change your shoes, change your shoes. Your shoes are filthy." Xiao Ran couldn't help but chuckle. Of all times, you're still concerned about such details? Truly befitting a rich kid, so particular. Xiao Ran thought for a moment. He'd have to take them off eventually, so now was fine too. He took off his boots, put on slippers, and followed the couple into the living room. Sure enough, there was a fireplace burning in the living room, though the firewood inside was pitifully scarce. Cheng Hua glanced at Xiao Ran, a smug look appearing on his face. "Shocked, aren't you? Didn't expect us to have a fireplace. Hee hee, I bet you that in the entire city of Suzhou, the number of houses with fireplaces won't exceed this." He held up one hand, meaning no more than 5 households. Clearly, he was looking down on Xiao Ran for being poor and was showing off. Xiao Ran was speechless again. "You're still flaunting your wealth at a time like this? Aren't you afraid I'll rob you, kill you, and sleep with your wife?" I'm not particularly interested in robbing and killing, but sleeping with your wife? That's definitely on the agenda. Right now, Xiao Ran's desire was burning hotter and hotter. "Xiao Ran, how on earth did you get here? And what did you come here for?" Cheng Hua finally couldn't help but ask. This was too strange. Xiao Ran smiled faintly. "I drove here. As for why I'm here, I want to settle a score with our class president." "You have a car?" Cheng Hua and his wife exclaimed in unison, their voices filled with surprise, conveniently ignoring the second half of Xiao Ran's sentence. "That's great." They were extremely excited. With a car, they could go out to find supplies instead of just depleting what they had. It had been a month. They had been eating instant noodles, compressed biscuits, and various canned foods every day, and they were about to puke. "Xiao Ran, lend me your car." "No, sell it to me. Name your price. I'll give you the money right now." Cheng Hua said, acting all high and mighty. A rich kid, after all, used to throwing money around to get what he wanted. Xiao Ran just looked at him calmly. "First, what use is money now? Second, even if it were useful, how would you transfer it? Third, you don't seem to have heard what I just said. I'm here to settle a score with you." "What score?" Cheng Hua looked bewildered. Xiao Ran smiled faintly. "Our class president truly has a short memory for a man of importance. Back in school, he used to bring people to corner me every day. He was an orphan, used to being quiet and reserved, while Cheng Hua in high school, relying on his family's wealth, would bully anyone he could. And in Cheng Hua's eyes, who was the easiest target in class? Obviously, it was Xiao Ran, who had no parents. So, he often brought his lackeys to corner Xiao Ran. Once or twice, Xiao Ran endured it, but when Cheng Hua went too far, Xiao Ran exploded. Ignoring the punches and kicks from Cheng Hua's lackeys, he focused solely on beating Cheng Hua, nearly sending him to the hospital that time. Afterward, although Xiao Ran had acted in self-defense, he still received a major demerit from the school and was almost expelled, undoubtedly due to Cheng Hua's parents pulling strings behind the scenes. However, Cheng Hua was also scared by Xiao Ran and didn't dare to trouble him again after that. Almost 10 years had passed in a flash. Cheng Hua had long forgotten his youthful misdeeds, but Xiao Ran would never forget. It was just that before, he couldn't possibly have gone looking for Changhua specifically. He didn't even know where the guy lived. This time, it was truly a coincidence. But since they had met, it was time for a reckoning. A look of recollection appeared on Chenghua's face. After a while, he said angrily, Xiao Ran, you still have a nerve to talk about settling scores with me? You were the one who hit me back then, almost putting me in the hospital. Xiao Ran was stunned for a moment. You don't even mention the cause and effect. Oh, so you're the type who only remembers the grievances you suffered, conveniently forgetting how you bullied others? He shook his head. Changhua, you were a school tyrant in high school, leading your lackeys around bullying everyone every day. Have you forgotten how many times you cornered me? The last time, you brought a whole gang to corner me. I couldn't take it anymore. So even if it meant getting beaten by a group, I had to single you out and thrash you. You were indeed almost hospitalized, but I was hospitalized. Not only that, I was branded with the infamy of assaulting a classmate and received a major demerit. Class president. Oh, class president. Have you forgotten all of this? Changhua thought hard, but still shook his head. He really had forgotten. Was bullying others even a big deal? Only the grievances one suffered oneself counted. Sun Jie, ever the clever one, quickly said, Xiao Ran, that was all a long time ago. My husband was young and foolish back then. Please be the bigger person and let bygones be bygones. Changhua, however, was still very reluctant, muttering, he was clearly the one who hit me. He should be the one apologizing to me. Xiao Ran smiled faintly. People like Changhua would never repent. So, he had to resort to strong medicine. Today, I'm going to thoroughly humiliate you. You too, wait for me a moment. Xiao Ran moved the table blocking the door, then shifted the door itself aside, put on his hat, and walked out. Changhua and his wife exchanged bewildered glances, completely baffled. Xiao Ran just left? Wait for him. What on earth did that mean? Let's barricade the door so he can't get back in. Changhua declared. Sun Jie shot him a withering look. Are you an idiot? Our door is custom-made. If that couldn't stop him, what do you think you can use? Changhua was speechless. He scratched his head. Then what do we do? This is our home. How can we let him waltz in and out like he owns the place? Let's just wait and see what he's planning, Sun Jie said, a headache already forming. Just how much damn trouble had her husband stirred up in his youth? A short while later, they heard the roar of an engine, and then an imposing SUV pulled up to their doorstep. Xiao Ran got out and began unloading things from the vehicle. Was that a stove? A hot pot stove? Changhua and his wife were stunned for a moment, then ecstatic. They hurriedly opened the door and let Xiao Ran in. After the stove, Xiao Ran carried in an enormous plastic bag. A quick glance revealed it was crammed with boxes of ingredients. Hot pot. They could finally eat hot pot. Changhua and his wife were so overcome with emotion they felt like crying. They had been subsisting on dry rations and canned food for an entire month. Xiao Ran set up the stove in the living room and started the fire. Soon, the red chili oil in the pot was bubbling furiously, and a mouth-watering aroma filled the air, making them drool. Without waiting for an invitation, Changhua and his wife had already gathered around, chopsticks in hand, ready to dip food into the simmering pot. But Xiao Ran held up a hand, stopping them. What do you think you're doing? Aren't you treating us to hot pot? Changhua asked, taken aback. Xiao Ran chuckled. When did I ever say that? Changhua paused. It was true. Xiao Ran hadn't said anything of the sort. He quickly retorted, You brought the hot pot all the way to our house. If not to treat us, then what for? Because I felt like it, Xiao Ran stated. Any problem with that? Chenghua's face flushed crimson at his words. He snapped, If you're not going to let us eat, then get your stove out of here. You're not welcome. He sounded tough, but his stomach betrayed him with an embarrassingly loud growl, and saliva pooled in his mouth. He was starving, the craving unbearable. Even the dry rations and canned food they'd come to loathe were completely gone. Xiao Ran shook his head. I'm eating right here. Xiao Ran, are you completely unreasonable? Changhua raged. Xiao Ran laughed. Oh, so now you want to talk about reason? Back in school, when I begged you, pleaded with you to leave me alone, did you listen then? I spent over half a month in the hospital, got a major demerit on my record, and was almost expelled. That's a debt not so easily wiped clean. Fury surged through Changhua. He lunged forward to grab Xiao Ran. Get the hell out. However, Xiao Ran merely tensed his arm slightly, and Changhua stumbled backward. Trying to match my strength? Xiao Ran thought. Unless your ability is physical enhancement, or you've absorbed 4 abilities yourself, you have no business trying. Sun Jie quickly caught her husband, preventing him from falling flat on his back. Humiliated and furious, Chung Hua shoved his wife's supporting hands away and pointed an accusing finger at Xiao Ran. "You've gone too far. This is my house. My house." He was absolutely seething. How dare someone barge into another's home to eat hot pot? And the worst part was, not even let the hosts eat. "What's wrong? You going to bite me?" Xiao Ran casually picked up a slice of meat and began to swish it in the pot. In just 3 seconds, the prime cut of snowflake beef was perfectly cooked. He dipped it in sauce and popped it into his mouth. Exquisite. Watching him swallow, Chung Hua and his wife couldn't help but gulp, their own mouths watering uncontrollably. Chung Hua was livid. So what if he'd bullied Xiao Ran a little out of youthful ignorance? Hadn't Xiao Ran gotten his revenge already? He vividly remembered how badly Xiao Ran had beaten him up that day. How else would he have learned his lesson and stopped bothering him? To still hold a grudge after all this time? Petty. So incredibly petty. He couldn't bear to watch any longer and stormed off to another room in a huff. But the aroma of the hot pot was overwhelmingly strong. It seeped under the door, tantalizing him, making his mouth water incessantly. No, he really couldn't take it. He was too hungry. Xiao Ran spoke leisurely. "Class monitor, it's not entirely out of the question for you to eat. However, you'll have to trade something I need for it." Like a shot, Chung Hua rushed back out, his face alight with desperate hope. "What do you want?" At this point, he was willing to give anything for a proper meal. A wicked smirk spread across Xiao Ran's face as he looked toward Sun Jie. "I'd like to borrow your wife for a while." Borrow his wife? Holy shit. Chung Hua understood instantly, jumping in pure rage. "Bastard, you want to sleep with my wife?" "Yes," Xiao Ran nodded, making no attempt to hide his intention. After absorbing the new abilities, his libido had surged. Combined with his old grudge against Chung Hua, he wasn't about to let this opportunity pass. That was precisely why he'd gone through this whole charade. Otherwise, he would have just offered food as a direct trade and had his way with her from start. But now, he wanted to humiliate Chung Hua. Humiliate him thoroughly. I really am a bit twisted, Xiao Ran thought to himself. But he felt not a shred of remorse. In an apocalypse like this, who wasn't struggling with suppressed emotions? If he didn't find some way to release and vent, he'd undoubtedly snap. Chung Hua was so furious he wanted to strike him. But then he remembered his failed attempt to kick Xiao Ran out earlier. There was no point in inviting further humiliation. The crucial, agonizing fact was that this man was eating hot pot right in his own home. How delicious every morsel looked. And that heavenly scent. How many days had it been since he'd tasted real meat? He was starving, his cravings a torment. Xiao Ran turned his gaze to Sun Jie again. "So, will you sleep with me or not? It's your body. You can decide for yourself. I'd rather not have a middleman taking a cut." Before Sun Jie could utter a word, Chung Hua stepped in front of her, roaring at Xiao Ran. "Xiao Ran, even if I starve to death, I will never eat your food." Famous last words, Xiao Ran thought, a faint, knowing smile playing on his lips. "Suit yourselves. One good thing about me," Xiao Ran continued, "is that I don't like to force people." Technically true, the silent narrator might have added, since he'd killed anyone who didn't comply. Xiao Ran said no more and resumed eating. He even produced a bottle of beer. Hot pot and beer. Could there be a more perfect combination? Chung Hua and Sun Jie's composure shattered once more. They weren't just hungry. They were thirsty, desperately so. In fact, the thirst was even more unbearable. Their food had run out yesterday, but their water supply had been exhausted the day before that. Watching Xiao Ran take a long gulp of beer, they instinctively licked their lips, but their tongues were so parched they barely found any moisture. They couldn't stand it. They truly couldn't stand it any longer. "Xiao Ran, name another condition." Chung Hua cried out, a look of utter desperation on his face, as if he was ready to gamble everything. "There are plenty of valuables in the house, luxury cars, antiques, things like that. Take whatever you want. We just beg for one meal and some water." It was hard to imagine a more demeaning plea. Xiao Ran remained unmoved. He glanced at Chung Hua and said, "I'm only interested in women. Besides, if you sell your wife to me, only she gets to sit down and eat. If you want to eat too, first your wife has to agree to be sold. Second, you have to kneel and beg my forgiveness for your high school bullying." "What the F?" Chung Hua started to curse, but when he saw Xiao Ran's piercing gaze sweep over him, he couldn't help but shut his mouth. Sun Jie bit her lip hard. She certainly wasn't a loose woman, but the current situation was desperate. Was it better to starve with her dignity intact, or abandon her pride and sell her body to survive? She hesitated, torn. "Time's limited, you know," Xiao Ran said unhurriedly. I'll be leaving once I'm done eating. This offer won't last. He took a few more bites, patted his stomach, looking full. In reality, he wasn't hungry. Or rather, it wasn't his stomach that was hungry, but he started to pack up. Wait, Chenghua quickly stopped him. The moment the word left his mouth, veins throbbed on his forehead. Sun Jie's face paled, and she whipped her head around to look at him. Honey, even though Chenghua had only said wait, it already meant he was considering Xiao Ran's conditions. You, how could you do this? Trust me, Chenghua said in a low voice, a cunning glint in his eyes. We have to insist on eating our fill first. Then, when he takes you to bed, you have to lure him into taking off his clothes first. That's when you grab his clothes and run outside. Naked as he'll be, can he even chase you in this temperature? We'll take the chance to drive his car away. Honey, with the car, we can go anywhere, we can survive, and we can live like kings. In Chenghua's mind, Xiao Ran was living so comfortably solely because he had a car that could handle extreme weather. So if they could just get that car, they could take his place. Sun Jie heard his reasoning and nodded repeatedly. If there was another choice, who would want to sell their body? Chenghua, having a plan, deliberately said through gritted teeth, Xiao Ran, we agree. Xiao Ran pointed at Sun Jie. You can eat first. As for you, he gestured to Chenghua. Come on, kneel and apologize. Veins throbbed on Chenghua's forehead again. Kneel first? But could he refuse? In terms of strength, Xiao Ran's earlier display had already proven they weren't even in the same league. The Qing dynasty fell long ago, yet I still have to kneel to someone who isn't an elder. What utter humiliation. Fine, you just wait. After I take your car, let's see how I humiliate you. Xiao Ran raised an eyebrow. Chenghua gritted his teeth, his knees buckled, and he knelt. I'm sorry, Xiao Ran. I was young and ignorant back then to have bullied you. Please forgive me. Xiao Ran, of course, wouldn't let him off so easily. He said lightly, don't be so perfunctory. When you kneel, of course, you have to kowtow. Don't you understand that principle? Having already kneeled, Chenghua naturally wouldn't stop halfway. So he began to kowtow. 1, 2, 3. Xiao Ran didn't tell him to stop, and he didn't dare to. After kowtowing more than 20 times, he was feeling dizzy before Xiao Ran finally said, all right, you can eat too. Chenghua finally breathed a sigh of relief, quickly sat down, and began to wolf down his food. Xiao Ran watched him calmly. Although the couple had lowered their voices while discussing their plan earlier, his physique had improved. While he hadn't developed super hearing, his listening ability was indeed a notch stronger than before. How could their conversation escape him? But even if he hadn't heard, Xiao Ran probably would have guessed. And with his cautious nature, would he really let these two succeed, trying to get a free meal and more out of me? You'll be crying for your mamas and papas later. Both sides were scheming, each confident of their own success. The only difference was one side truly had the strength, while the other merely thought they did. After eating for a long time, Sun Jie was finally full. She even let out a small burp. The beer had brought a slight blush to her cheeks, making her look even more alluring. It had to be admitted, Chenghua was one lucky bastard. Even if Sun Jie wasn't quite on the level of Han Yun or Su Qingmei, she was still an 80, maybe even an 82 or 83 out of 100. And she had a fantastic figure, those peaks pressed prominently against her chest. Xiao Ran, already stirred up from absorbing the special ability, grew even hotter looking at Sun Jie's deeply seductive appearance. He picked up the kettle heating on the stove. The hot pot had already been moved to the table and was no longer cooking, and said to Sun Jie, time for you to fulfill your promise. Sun Jie felt a pang of guilt and couldn't help but look at her husband. Chenghua gave her an encouraging glance. You can do it. He was full of confidence in his wife's charm. As long as she played her part, Xiao Ran would naturally be utterly smitten. Then they could make up an excuse like close your eyes, I have a surprise for you, and seize the chance to grab his clothes and escape. Could Xiao Ran chase them? Running around butt naked now wasn't just about a cool breeze on your backside. He'd freeze to death. Chenghua swore that once they were in the SUV, he would hurl the most vicious insults at Xiao Ran. No, he'd also trick Xiao Ran into kneeling to pay back every single kowtow he had just performed. But would he let Xiao Ran get in the car? Of course not. Dream on. Encouraged by her husband's gaze and fueled by her desire to survive, Sun Jie mustered her courage and calmed herself. She stood up and led Xiao Ran upstairs. Sun Jie had intended to take Xiao Ran to the guest room, but Xiao Ran refused, heading straight for the master bedroom instead. Above the headboard hung a wedding photo of Chenghua and Sun Jie. In the photo, Sun Jie was smiling sweetly, radiating a dazzling beauty that was simply breathtaking. Her low-cut dress struggled to contain her ample bosom, revealing a deep, alluring cleavage. Seeing Xiao Ran looking at her wedding photo, Sun Jie couldn't help but blush, a strange sense of shame washing over her. "How did you and Tsinghua meet?" Xiao Ran asked. Sun Jie paused to recall, then said, "We were introduced by our families." "Oh, what do you do?" Xiao Ran asked casually. "I'm with the city dance troupe." "Oh." Xiao Ran sized Sun Jie up. Indeed, the woman had exceptionally long legs and a beautifully proportioned body. "Let me see." Xiao Ran, of course, wouldn't just look, but since he hadn't taken off his clothes yet, Sun Jie didn't dare to turn hostile. They still needed to get Xiao Ran's car keys. "You get undressed and wait on the bed. I'm going to the bathroom to wash up. Don't want to get this place wet," she said. A delaying tactic. Of course, she wasn't actually going to wash up in the bathroom. It was just an excuse to get Xiao Ran to quickly take off his clothes so she could snatch them. Xiao Ran chuckled, leaning close to her ear. "You and your husband have quite the scheme, don't you? Get me to take off my clothes, then you snatch them, grab the car keys, and drive off. Heh, do you really think I'm an idiot?" Sun Jie couldn't help but tremble, terror flickering in her eyes. "No, I don't want to make the deal anymore," she said, shaking her head frantically. Xiao Ran scoffed. "You've already eaten my food and drunk my beer, and now you're telling me you don't want a deal? Why don't you give it back then? Please just consider it a debt I owe you. I'll pay you back later. I promise." Sun Jie pleaded. "No." Xiao Ran shook his head. "Small business, no credit. Where in the world do you find such a sweet deal? Eat your fill, wipe your mouth, and then say you're backing out. Freeloading off him? No way." Xiao Ran opened the door. Thump! Tsinghua fell right to the ground. The guy had been lost in his lewd fantasies, and the fall finally jolted him awake. At first, he looked a bit dazed, then his eyes blazed with fury, and he lunged for Xiao Ran's throat. "Hand over the car keys, or I'll kill you." Xiao Ran simply gave him a light kick, and Tsinghua went tumbling like a gourd, clutching his stomach and curling up like a cooked shrimp. It hurt. A lot. And that was Xiao Ran holding back. Otherwise, he would have kicked his internal organs into mush. Why not just kill this guy? After all the times Tsinghua and his lackeys had cornered Xiao Ran in the past, how could he let him die so easily? Xiao Ran could be particularly petty sometimes. Why had he deliberately driven the car over before bringing out the hot pot stove? Wasn't it precisely to hide his secret? Therefore, Tsinghua and his wife only knew he possessed great strength and wouldn't connect it to spatial abilities. Why? As a precaution, if, by any chance, another ability user came here, happened to meet this couple, and inquired about Xiao Ran, that ability user would, at most, assume Xiao Ran was a strength-type ability user. In a confrontation with Xiao Ran, would such a misjudgment be fatal? Absolutely. The moment his spatial gate opened, countless steel bars, rocks, bullets, even rocket-propelled grenades would pour out. In a head-on clash, who could possibly block it? Or dodge it? Given the current capabilities of ability users, probably no one could. So, Xiao Ran deliberately kept Tsinghua alive, partly to humiliate him, and partly to set him as bait. Of course, the chances of anyone taking the bait were slim, but it cost Xiao Ran nothing. However, if Xiao Ran did this a few more times, the chances of other ability users discovering his true nature would increase significantly. Then, if they still harbored ill intentions towards him, they'd be walking right into his trap. Sigh, he used to be such a simple person. But now, the apocalypse had forced him to constantly use his brain, to scheme, not just to plot against others, but also to guard against their plots. It was quite the mental burden. "Bastard! You bastard!" Tsinghua shrieked in pain, still cursing Xiao Ran. Xiao Ran slammed his fist down, smashing the vanity into splinters. Only then did Tsinghua snap out of it, going rigid with fear, no longer daring to speak. If that punch had landed on him, he'd be dead. And in times like these, who would even care? Laws? What laws? You'd be lucky to find a living soul, let alone someone to enforce them. Tsinghua instantly backed down, no longer daring to point at Xiao Ran or hurl insults. The thing about rich people, they cherish their lives more than anyone. The more you have, the more you're afraid to lose. Sure, the old world was gone. Wealth meant nothing now, but it hadn't been that long. Who could truly accept this new reality? Tsinghua certainly hadn't. Deep down, he still clung to a sliver of hope. What if the disaster passed quickly? What if everything went back to how it used to be? "Class rep," Xiao Ran said, crouching next to him, his tone casual but chilling. "We had a deal, didn't we? I bring you food, you kneel and apologize. I ever force you?" He didn't need to threaten him. Just shaking his fist was enough. "And no," Tsinghua stammered. Then why were you losing your mind over it? Xiao Ran chuckled. He stepped outside, but came back a moment later. I'll be back in a couple of days. Don't worry, I never force anyone. Just trades. You can refuse if you want. He glanced at Sun Jie, who was still curled under the blanket, refusing to show her face. Then he tossed a few bags of bread, jerky, and bottled water onto the floor. Consider that a reward, he said, like a patron throwing coins to a beggar. Chenghua saw it. As much as he still wanted to strangle Xiao Ran, there was a part of him that felt relief. At least they could eat today. Xiao Ran laughed heartily and walked out, satisfied. It had been a lucky bonus. He'd come here for revenge and to harvest powers, but who would have thought he'd run into his old high school tormentors, the ones who bullied and humiliated him. Not only did he vent the fiery rage left over from absorbing powers, but he also got to settle old scores. Revenge, power, closure. How could he not be pleased? Once Xiao Ran left, Sun Jie finally broke down and sobbed. Cry, cry, cry. What good does crying do? Chenghua snapped. You're a woman. If you didn't cooperate, would he have gotten his way with you? Or did you see how much food he had and get soft? Is that it? You let him in willingly because you wanted what he had. He sneered. Otherwise, why would he think you were worth it? Why reward you afterward, huh? Sun Jie, you're disgusting. You know that? Sun Jie stared at her husband in disbelief. Did those words actually come out of his mouth? Get out. Get the hell out, she screamed. Xiao Ran couldn't care less whether that couple fought or killed each other. Honestly, even if one of them died, it wouldn't register for him. Just a bit less entertainment. He moved on to search the rest of the villas. There might still be stragglers. Since he'd started this, he intended to finish it. No loose ends. He kept searching, but there weren't many survivors left in the entire neighborhood. Most had already starved, frozen, or died of thirst. Chenghua and Sun Jie were the exception. A while back, Chenghua had binged a bunch of zombie flicks and, on a whim, stockpiled loads of dried food and bottled water. He even reinforced the doors and windows. Rich people could afford to be paranoid like that. Turn out that random bit of wasteful prep saved their lives when disaster struck. Xiao Ran chuckled to himself. The day was already getting late. Time to head home. He made his way back to the deserted Jufu community. Everything was silent, but when he opened the garage and stepped inside, a comforting warmth wrapped around him. Early morning, Xiao Ran slowly woke up. He glanced at the time, a little past 7 a.m. Still early. Xiao Ran put down his phone and went back to sleep. Why wake up so early? To clock in for work? When Xiao Ran woke up again, it was already past 9 a.m. Get up. Breakfast is ready. Sleepyhead. All 10 people in the household came downstairs to the first floor and started eating breakfast. After breakfast, Xiao Ran had originally planned to work out, but he discovered his strength had surged dramatically. The existing fitness equipment was completely useless to him now. Dumbbells? Please, they were only a few dozen kilograms. With his current strength exceeding 500 kilograms, they felt like a child holding a chopstick. What kind of workout was that supposed to be? I need a custom-built gym, and it needs to be big. Clearly, the villa couldn't meet his needs. The garage used to be a decent spot for him to run or even walk the leopard, but now there was a huge hole in it. Not only was it drafty, but half of it was blocked off. How could he run or walk the leopard there now? Xiao Ran couldn't help but think of the Chong family's estate. If he seized it, that would naturally solve his current problems. For example, with more and more beautiful women around, the villa was getting increasingly crowded. Besides, it was just 4 floors up and down, back and forth. Such a tiny damn place could easily make people feel cooped up. People are just like that, greedy. At first, they only want to survive. But once survival is secured, they start thinking it would be best to eat a little better. And when that problem is solved, they crave even more. Never satisfied, Xiao Ran began to think seriously. The mere fact that the Chong family hadn't awakened one among them was reason enough for him to go. If I'm not strong now, I'll be at the mercy of others later. Absolutely not. I just absorbed an ability, and my body is still in the process of strengthening. It should last for at least 2 more days. So I'll spend these 2 days planning properly, and then I'll make my move on the 3rd day. At the very least, I should scout out the situation over at Dongshan. Xiao Ran made his decision. He started studying a map. Surprisingly, the Chong family's estate was even marked on it. Looking at its area, damn, it was huge. A rough estimate suggested it was no smaller than a sports stadium. It even had a proper name, not just Building X of Y residential area, but Chong Manor. No wonder it was marked individually on the map. However, that was all the information the map provided. For anything else, Xiao Ran would have to go there and scout it out himself. That day, Xiao Ran didn't go anywhere. The next day, Xiao Ran shook off his laziness and went out to gather fuel. If he moved to Chong Manor, getting to the city center would be more troublesome in the future. It was too far. So, naturally, he had to gather more resources now while he had the chance. After all, a place as large as Chong Manor would undoubtedly consume a huge amount of fuel for power generation every day. Xiao Ran had prepared everything else, just not enough fuel. It couldn't be helped. Before the cataclysm, he'd had to be a law-abiding citizen, of course. Besides, back then, he never even thought about seizing Chong Manor. He'd assumed a single villa would be enough for him to live comfortably. But facts prove that human greed knows no bounds. And greed wasn't necessarily a bad thing. At least it could motivate people to constantly improve and strive for more. After being busy until the afternoon, Xiao Ran took a detour to the wealthy residential complex where Chunghua lived. His desire for revenge was still quite strong. Entering Chunghua's home, he saw the couple was starving. Although Xiao Ran had left them some food, they had finished it all yesterday. Now, they had missed 2 more meals, and their eyes lit up when they saw Xiao Ran. Over an hour later, Xiao Ran asked Sun Jie, "Tell me, how did Chunghua pursue you back then?" He was going too far, but Sun Jie didn't dare refuse to answer. She said, "What else could there be? He's a rich second-generation kid. He sent flowers every day, waited for me at the entrance of the dance troupe in his luxury car. I fell for him in less than a month." A thought struck Xiao Ran, and he asked, "Wang Ning, Zhao Peng, Zhang Yong. Have you heard these 3 names?" These 3 were Chunghua's lackeys back in the day, and every one of them had beaten him. Sun Jie immediately said, "These 3 are all employees at my husband's company. They get along well with him and often come over to hang out." "Huh?" Xiao Ran chuckled. Wang Ning and the other 2 had been sucking up to Chunghua since high school. He hadn't expected them to still be doing it after getting into university and starting their careers. They were even planning to be Chunghua's lapdogs for life. Such bootlickers. "Do you know where each of them lives?" he asked. Sun Jie thought for a moment before giving an address. "Actually, Chunghua and I have been all 3 of their homes, but we only visited the others once. We went to Zhao Peng's place often, so that's the only address I remember." "Often? But why only Zhao Peng's place? Could it be?" He had a guess but didn't voice it. He opened a map and checked. What a coincidence. Zhao Peng's residential complex wasn't far from a gas station. Moreover, it was a gas station Xiao Ran hadn't visited yet. If it meant Xiao Ran had to make a special trip, he definitely wouldn't bother. He wasn't that idle. Right now, any free time he had was spent collecting fuel. That was the most important thing at this stage. However, if Zhao Peng's place was right next to the gas station, he wouldn't mind making a quick trip. Of course, it was too late today. There definitely wasn't enough time. He'd go home and head out tomorrow. Xiao Ran woke up very early today. Besides his usual fuel-gathering tasks, he had decided to make a trip to Zhao Peng's place. He just didn't know if Zhao Peng was still alive. Whatever, it was on the way. After breakfast, he made a point of going to Chunghua's house first to pick up the couple. However, once they were in the car, he knocked them out and let them sleep in the back seat. He got to work. Having started early, by 2 in the afternoon, he had already completed his task for the day. Excellent. He arrived at a residential complex. They were commodity apartments in a very good location. Before the cataclysm, second-hand units here probably sold for around 50,000 per square meter. Zhao Peng could actually afford this? Heh. Xiao Ran drove the car in. The entire complex wasn't as dead and silent as he'd imagined. Xiao Ran vaguely saw people standing behind some windows, looking down with what seemed like shocked gazes. Of course, Xiao Ran couldn't see their facial expressions clearly. It was just a guess. Human vitality was truly tenacious. The car stopped at Building 7. Xiao Ran splashed half a cup of water on Chunghua and his wife, waking them up. How did I fall asleep? Both of them were puzzled. Could it be that the car was too warm, causing them to doze off unknowingly? "This is Zhao Peng's complex," Chunghua suddenly exclaimed. "You seem quite familiar with it," Xiao Ran chuckled. An unnatural expression flickered across Chunghua's face before he quickly said, "I've been here a few times, so of course I know it." "Oh, only a few times?" Xiao Ran said leisurely. "Of course, only a few times," Chunghua said, deliberately glancing at Sun Jie. "Get out of the car," Xiao Ran said flatly. Chunghua and his wife naturally didn't want to leave such a warm environment. But how could they dare to disobey Xiao Ran? They got out of the car. Fortunately, they were wearing thick winter clothes, so they wouldn't freeze to death immediately, but they still started shivering. It was incredibly cold outside. Xiao Ran pushed open the building door and went inside. The elevator, of course, was out of order, so they started climbing the stairs. After climbing just 6 floors, Cheng Hua was panting, his head already covered in sweat. Class monitor, you really need to work out more, Xiao Ran chuckled. Cheng Hua could only roll his eyes. They barely had enough to eat these days. Where would he find the extra energy to exercise? Luckily, Xiao Peng's apartment was on the 9th floor. They climbed another 3 floors and finally arrived. Xiao Ran went to knock on the door. He had gone to so much trouble. He really hoped Xiao Peng wasn't dead. Otherwise, all his effort would have been for nothing. After a moment, a voice came from inside. Who is it? There was a hint of ferocity in its caution. Xiao Ran's eyes lit up. A distant memory was awakened. That had to be Xiao Peng's voice. He gestured to Cheng Hua, signaling him to speak. Cheng Hua had no choice but to walk to the door and call out loudly. It's me, Cheng Hua. Boss. The voice inside sounded slightly excited, followed by the sound of a door opening. Sure enough, the door opened, revealing a person. Xiao Peng. They hadn't seen each other in years. Xiao Peng hadn't changed drastically, just matured a lot. The tall boy from before had become a tall man. 1 meter 82 tall, weighing well over 200 pounds. He was indeed very robust. Boss, what are you doing here? How did you get here? Xiao Peng asked repeatedly. But before Cheng Hua could answer, he slapped his own forehead. It's that vehicle. Boss, you're too good to me. Actually coming all this way to pick us up? He was so moved, he was on the verge of tears. Cheng Hua, however, looked a bit awkward. He could barely fend for himself. How could he possibly have the ability to save this lackey? Besides, even if the vehicle were really his, he had never once thought about saving this minion. His own safety was paramount. Oh, come in. Quickly come in. Xiao Peng seemed to snap back to reality and hurriedly welcomed Xiao Ran and the other 2 inside. However, he didn't recognize Xiao Ran, merely assuming he was Cheng Hua and Sun Jie's driver. Xiao Ran had no intention of clarifying. The 3 of them entered, and Xiao Peng quickly closed the door. It wasn't as cold inside. Outside, it was over 40 degrees below zero. Here, it was probably around 10 below. In the living room, 2 people were huddled under blankets. 1 adult, 1 child. The adult was a young woman, around 25, decent-looking. Her figure, of course, was hidden, but there was a flirtatious charm in her eyes and at the corners of her brows. The child was a little boy, 3 or 4 years old at most. Clearly, this was Xiao Peng's wife and son. When she saw Cheng Hua, Xiao Peng's wife's eyes suddenly lit up, a look of excitement on her face. Xiao Ran caught the woman's reaction, then took a closer look at Xiao Peng's son. A smile that said, just as I thought, spread across his face. How am I so clever? Boss, let me pack up a few things, and we can leave right away. Xiao Peng was about to go into an inner room to gather valuables like. Xiao Peng was utterly stunned. In the middle of a catastrophe like this, somehow, 3 of his old high school classmates had ended up gathered in his house. What were the odds? The most incredible part? One of them was Xiao Ran, the kid they used to bully in school. Well, to be fair, it was mainly Cheng Hua who did the bullying. Xiao Peng had just been a lackey. When the boss said bite, he bit. It was that simple. But now, both the boss and the victim were here under his roof. How could he not be shocked? Is this really the apocalypse? Why does it feel like running into people is easier than ever? He frowned. Xiao Ran, what's the meaning of this? Xiao Peng was tall and broad-shouldered, clearly a bit bigger than Xiao Ran. And when it came to muscle, please, he could take Xiao Ran 2-on-1. He'd been hitting the gym religiously for years just to stay useful to Cheng Hua. Not only was he loyal, but he was also strong. A perfect psychic, and his flattery hadn't gone unrewarded. Cheng Hua had even introduced him to a beautiful woman from his company, his current wife. Xiao Peng had never thought he was good enough for her, but they ended up married, even had a kid together. That only made him more loyal to Cheng Hua. Xiao Ran gave a faint smile. That car outside is mine. Who I take with me is my choice. But that's not why I came, Xiao Peng. Your son doesn't look a damn thing like you. After being burned once in his past life, Xiao Ran had become hypersensitive to this sort of thing. And this wasn't just paranoia. He was dead serious. The kid really didn't look like him. The moment he said it, Cheng Hua and Xiao Peng's wife both flinched ever so slightly. Barely noticeable, but Xiao Ran caught it. He had been 50% suspicious before. Now he was 100% certain. Their synchronized reaction was all the proof he needed. What the hell are you saying? Xiao Peng exploded, veins bulging on his forehead, his anger peaking. He was ready to throw hands. His temper had always been volatile. I'm just doing you a favor, reminding you not to raise someone else's kid. Do you even know your son's blood type? Enough. Xiao Peng's wife screamed. Why are you letting him say this garbage? Throw him out. Yeah, Let's take this bastard down and snatch his car keys. That car's ours now. With his boss giving the order, Xiao Peng didn't even hesitate. He'd been Cheng Hua's flunky for years, and obeying orders had become second nature. His body moved before his brain even processed the command. He lunged towards Xiao Ran. Bang! One punch, and Xiao Peng stumbled back, nearly losing his footing. Thud! He landed hard on his ass, face pale as a sheet, breath knocked out of him. Xiao Ran turned his gaze on Xiao Peng's wife. So, that kid, he's Cheng Hua's, isn't he? What? Cheng Hua, Xiao Peng, and his wife all froze. Cheng Hua and the woman looked terrified. Xiao Peng and Sun Jia, stunned disbelief. Think carefully before you answer. Xiao Ran pulled a gun from his pocket and gave it a light tap on his palm. It was empty, but that didn't matter. If he wanted to fire, he could make it happen. This was just a safety measure to avoid accidental discharges. No bullets needed to make a point. The color drained from the woman's face. She was completely rattled, lost for words. Xiao Ran didn't push. He'd already achieved what he came for. Now it was just a little fun. Let's start simple. What's your name? He asked. Si, she stammered, no longer hesitating. Xiao Ran nodded. And how did you meet Xiao Peng? She hesitated again. A few seconds passed. We worked at the same company. Xiao Ran chuckled. So, you've known Cheng Hua for a while then? Chun Si forced a smile. I was the receptionist at his company. Of course I knew him. So, did he seduce you? Or were you the one who made the first move? Xiao Ran abruptly raised the gun and pointed it at her. Lie to me, and I'll shoot. It was me. It was me. Chun Si panicked, her mind going blank, the truth spilling out in raw fear. The room fell silent. Xiao Ran looked from Xiao Peng to Sun Jia and smiled. Let me ask again, is the kid Cheng Hua's? Chun Si regretted her answer instantly. I never slept with Cheng Hua. You forced me to say that. I was scared. Xiao Ran flicked his ear, then gestured with the gun between Cheng Hua and the kid. Come on, everyone, take a look. Don't they look alike? Cheng Hua had a narrow, pointy face. Xiao Peng had a square jaw and a broad forehead. And the boy, he had none of Xiao Peng's features, but bore a clear resemblance to Cheng Hua. Xiao Peng began to tremble as he stared at the boy. Did they look alike? Not even close. He'd never questioned it before. But now that he looked closely, it was obvious. The more he stared, the more the kid looked like Cheng Hua. A storm of doubt consumed him. Why would Chun Si ever choose me? She was just a receptionist, sure, but Xiao Peng? He had no looks, no money, just brute strength. Was she just using him? Had she already been pregnant with Cheng Hua's kid and needed someone gullible to play the father? Cheng Hua used to visit often, and Xiao Peng had felt honored. Now, thinking back, it was laughable. Pathetic even. You son of a bitch. Xiao Peng roared and threw himself at Cheng Hua, tears flying from his eyes. The two men started brawling, fists flying wildly. Watching the former master and servant go at each other, Xiao Ran couldn't help but smile. Worth it. Chun Si tried to break them up, grabbing Xiao Peng's arm. Honey, please. Don't believe him. It's all lies. Cheng Hua and I are innocent. Innocent, my ass. Xiao Peng shouted, slapping her hard across the face and sending her stumbling backward. He pinned Cheng Hua down, slapping him over and over. You bastard. I'll beat you to death. Showtime. Xiao Ran didn't lift a finger, content to watch the dog turn on its master. Let go. Let go. Cheng Hua cried out. Xiao Peng had him by the throat and was pummeling him. The slaps to his face were just painful, but the grip on his neck was suffocating. His face was flushed crimson, even turning a shade of purple. He was on the verge of death. Seeing the situation, Chun Si immediately roared at Sun Jia. What are you just standing there for? You want to watch your own husband die? Then, she darted into the kitchen. Sun Jia was stunned for a second, but then scrambled towards Xiao Peng, grabbing at the hand he had around Cheng Hua's throat, trying to pull it away. But Xiao Peng was far too strong. She was no match for him. Luckily, Xiao Peng had to divert some of his strength to fend her off, giving Cheng Hua a precious moment to gasp for air, preventing him from being choked to death instantly. Just then, Chun Si came back, a kitchen knife in her hand. Seeing her husband engrossed in assaulting Cheng Hua, a vicious impulse overcame her, and she lunged, stabbing him hard. The knife sank into Xiao Peng's back. Arg! Xiao Peng shrieked, his hands flying off Cheng Hua as he stumbled backward. He fumbled behind him, trying to grab the knife, but couldn't reach. Fuck! 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 He roared, spinning around. Of course, he saw Chun Si, the one who'd stabbed him. His expression twisted into something bizarre. A mix of ferocity, rage, shock, anguish, dawning comprehension, and even a flicker of relief. D. Cheng-Hua, freed from the chokehold, slammed Zhao Peng with a hard shove. Bang! Zhao Peng, already weakened, crashed hard against the wall. The knife lodged in his back plunged even deeper. The initial stab had been surprisingly accurate, aimed right for Zhao Peng's heart through his back. Chen Si just hadn't had the strength to push it all the way in. But Cheng-Hua's shove drove the blade's tip straight into the organ. Zhao Peng didn't even glance at Cheng-Hua. His eyes were fixed on his wife, Chen Si. His mouth opened, as if trying to speak, but only blood came gushing out. He couldn't form a single word. The light in his eyes slowly faded. Finally, with a last, unwilling sigh, his head slumped, and he crumpled to the floor. Fresh blood started to pool from his back. What a venomous woman. Still, quite the spectacle. His efforts hadn't been for nothing, Xiao Ran mused, applauding slowly, deliberately. Sun Jie, however, fixed her gaze on Cheng-Hua. That child, is he really your son? She asked. How could Cheng-Hua deny it? Chen Si had just killed her own husband to save him. Wasn't it obvious they were having an affair? Heh. Cheng-Hua had no choice but to confess. Yes, wife, please let me explain. You know you can't conceive, and I couldn't just let the Cheng family name die with me. So, I had to resort to this. This desperate measure. Wife, you have to believe me. You're the one I love. She was just a bit of fun on the side. His words, however, did nothing to calm Sun Jie. Instead, they thoroughly enraged Chen Si. Cheng-Hua, have you no shred of decency? She screamed. I fucking bore you a son. I married Zhao Peng just to cover for you. And this is how you see me. Cheng-Hua was momentarily speechless, indecision flickering across his face. In his heart, of course, his wife, Sun Jie, was more important. Why else would he have married her? When it came to looks and figure, his wife was clearly superior. Yet, Chen Si was the mother of his illegitimate child. He couldn't just disown her entirely. What was he to do? Mommy, what happened to Daddy? The little boy suddenly piped up. Chen Si quickly said, My dear son, he's not your daddy. That man is, she declared, pointing at Cheng-Hua. The child, naturally, was confused. He shook his head repeatedly. No, he's Uncle Cheng. This is my daddy. Wah! The little boy burst into loud sobs. Daddy's bleeding. Daddy's bleeding. Chen Si, her nerves frayed by his wailing, abruptly yanked the knife from Zhao Peng's back. Blood instantly geysered out, and she had no time to avoid it, half her face getting splattered. Now, half her face crimson with blood, the knife still in her hand, she was a terrifying sight. She advanced on Sun Jie. Sun Jie, frightened by this horrifying visage, instinctively backed away. What are you doing? Cheng-Hua couldn't help but exclaim. Chen Si, put the knife down quick. Chen Si turned back to Cheng-Hua, a horrifying grin stretching her blood-smeared lips. I've been your lover for all these years. I even gave you a son. Today, I'm going to slaughter this bitch and become Mrs. Cheng, you got a problem with that. Faced with her utterly demonic appearance, Cheng-Hua was too intimidated to utter a word. His silence was her consent. Sun Jie's face turned deathly pale. The shock was too much for her. She shook her head, speaking to Chen Si. Don't be stupid. What air do you think this is? The riches and status you're chasing? They're just bubbles now, long popped. Cheng-Hua, a rich second generation? Don't kid yourself. He can't even get his hands on a loaf of bread these days. And you still think he's some kind of prize? Chen Si faltered, stunned by her words. It was true. What good was all that former wealth now? Her arm, holding the knife, dropped to her side. She broke down, wailing. A pang of pity struck Sun Jie. She stepped closer. We shouldn't let worthless men make us suffer. The final word of her sentence never came. She stopped dead, her eyes wide with disbelief, staring down at the knife buried in her chest. The hilt of the knife was gripped tightly in Chen Si's hand. Her blood-smeared face contorted into a chilling sneer. Don't you play the hypocrite with me. It's because of you I had to be Cheng-Hua's dirty little secret for years. Do you know how much I envied you? All that envy I felt for you back then has turned into pure hatred now. Die, you bitch. She thrust the knife deeper. Sun Jie stumbled back a few paces until her back hit the wall. The light in her eyes started to dim. At last, her head bowed, and she slumped to the ground. Wife! Wife! Cheng-Hua wailed, shedding crocodile tears. He shouted, but didn't dare move closer to check on her. He was terrified of the knife Chen Si still held. Xiao Ran couldn't help but shake his head. Chen Si had made a stupid decision. In an apocalypse like this, a strong, capable man like Zhao Peng was obviously far more useful than a pretty boy gigolo like Cheng-Hua. Send Cheng-Hua out to scavenge for supplies? Protect the family? Could he manage that? Ha, what a joke. Still, Xiao Ran was merely an observer. Chen Si suddenly turning and killing Sun Jia. That he hadn't anticipated. But his surprise was fleeting, quickly replaced by his usual impassivity. Even women like Han Yin were mere diversions for Xiao Ran. Was it likely he'd develop any actual feelings for Sun Jia? He had brought this husband and wife here today precisely to sever his ties with the past. If they died, so be it. It would save him the trouble of dirtying his own hands. Chen Si whirled around, her gaze, full of malice, fixed on Xiao Ran. If we kill him, the car will be ours, right? She demanded of Cheng Hua. Yes. Cheng Hua, thoroughly cowed, could only manage a nod. Chen Si began to walk slowly toward Xiao Ran, one deliberate step after another. Her expression was so chillingly terrifying that the little boy nearby looked like he'd stopped breathing from fright. But in that moment, no one paid him any mind.